Chapter 1234. Faced with Xiao Xing's gaze, Yinyangzi glanced at Qin Shiru and the other two girls and asked with great interest, "Are these three little girls also chosen of the sacred palace?" "No." Xiao Chen shook his head and explained. "The three of them are the wives of the first chosen of the sacred palace, Xiao Chen. They are not saintesses or prospective saintesses of the sacred palace, so they were not included in today's test. However, although they are not saintesses or prospective saintesses of the sacred palace, their talents are not weak. At the very least, they are stronger than Gudu Wuya and the other two." Because he had not accurately tested the talents of Qin Shiru and the other two girls, Xiao Xing did not dare to speak carelessly and could only speak conservatively. However, Qin Shiru and the other two girls were definitely more talented than Gudu Wuya and the other two. Yinyangzi's curiosity grew when he heard Xiao Xing's words, especially when he heard that the three girls were Xiao Chen's wives. Yinyangzi asked curiously, "If his wives are so talented, does this mean that Xiao Chen's talent is even higher than Chen Ling and the other two?" The impact on Xiao Chen was not deep and could even be said to be non-existent. Originally, Yinyangzi did not pay much attention to Xiao Chen. In Yinyangzi's opinion, even if Xiao Chen was the first chosen of the sacred palace, so what? The first chosen of a quasi-saint sect was at most 90 meters tall. Such a person naturally did not know that the Taiyang sect and the Tianyin sect were doing their best to rescue him. However, at this moment after the test, the performance of the sacred palace chosen, especially Chen Ling, Long Qing, and Chen Yu, had far exceeded Yinyangzi's expectations. Such a strange sect had so many monstrous geniuses. How strong was Xiao Chen's talent to be able to stand at the top of these monstrous geniuses? At the very least, he should be at the same level as Chen Ling and the other two. Yinyangzi guessed. But soon, Xiao Xing's answer surprised Yinyangzi. Previously, the North Star boundary didn't have a talent testing stone, so we didn't have an accurate judgment of Xiao Chen's talent. However, one thing we can guarantee is that Xiao Chen's talent is above Chen Ling and the other two. Xiao Chen's talent was even above Chen Ling and the other two. What kind of concept was this? One must know that reaching the level of 98 meters was only 2 meters away from the limit of 100 meters. And in this 2-meter distance, every meter of progress could be said to be the difference between heaven and earth. For example, the difference between 98 meters and 99 meters seemed to be only 1 meter, but in fact, there was a huge difference. This was the reason why it was lonely at the top. The higher one went, the harder it was to move forward, even if it was just a small step. If Xiao Chen's talent really was above Chen Ling and the other two, it would be too terrifying. If that was the case, Xiao Chen definitely had hopes of entering the top 3 on the saint rankings if he was carefully nurtured. 90 meters was a great threshold, which meant that one had the qualifications to enter the saint rankings. 90 meters was another great threshold, because above 98 meters meant that one had hopes of entering the top 3 on the saint rankings. Why was this so? Because for countless years, the top 3 on the saint rankings were all people with a talent of 99 meters. There had never been anyone with a talent of 98 meters who could enter the top 3 in the sacred palace. The top 3 on the saint rankings was not just a change in the rankings, but also contained a deeper meaning. Of course, this was still too far away from Xiao Chen. Xiao Xing looked at Xiao Chen. Faced with Yinyangzi's gaze, Xiao Xing felt a little nervous. Fortunately, Yinyangzi soon spoke. "Since there is no talent assessment stone, how can you be so sure that Xiao Chen's talent is above Chen Ling and the other two?" Yinyangzi asked this not because he did not believe in Xiao Xing, but because it was indeed a little exaggerated. A genius with a talent of 99 meters had not appeared in the human race for tens of thousands of years. The strongest chosen in the human race now only had a talent of 98 meters and was ranked 5th on the saint rankings. However, being ranked 5th was nothing to be proud of. This was because from the 4th to the 20th place on the Saint rankings, almost all of them had a talent of 98 meters, and their battle strength was almost the same. Therefore, there was no substantial difference between the 5th and 20th place on the Saint rankings. This was also why the top 3 on the Saint rankings had such a status. This was because the top 3 could truly suppress all the other chosen on the Saint rankings. In response to Yinyangzi's question, Shao Xing answered without hesitation. It's not difficult to see from his various performances that Shao Chen is younger than Chen Ling and the other two. Moreover, Shao Chen's cultivation was far inferior to Shao Chen's in the past. However, over the years, Shao Chen's rate of improvement is the fastest, and his battle strength is the same. Shao Xing's judgment was based on the fact that Shao Chen's cultivation speed was fast and his battle strength had improved by an absurd amount. Hearing this, Yinyangzi nodded slightly. He was getting more and more curious about Shao Chen, but he did not show it on his face. He said faintly. Instead, he said calmly, "Let the 3 little girls in. Let's see how talented they are." Due to his curiosity about Shao Chen, Yinyangzi also wanted to verify Shao Xing's guess. Now, the best way to verify it was naturally to test the talents of Qin Shuru and the other 2 girls. If Shao Xing's estimation of Qin Shuru and the other 2 girls was correct, then his estimation of Shao Chen should not be too far off. As Yinyangzi finished speaking, Qin Shuru and the other 2 girls strode into the square. Then, Qin Shuru was the first to be tested. The test did not take long, and the results of the 3 girls' test also shocked everyone. They were 95 meters. The 3 girls' talents had all reached 95 meters, which was even higher than Emperor Qing's. Yinyangzi, who was sitting on the main seat on the high platform, revealed a meaningful smile. They were indeed powerful. Shao Xing's estimation was not wrong. In fact, it was a little conservative. Since Qin Shuru and the other 2 girls were so talented, then how talented would Shao Chen be, since he was able to become the first chosen of the Sacred Palace? Before this, no one would have thought that because of this seemingly simple talent test, Yinyangzi would change his mind. Originally, Yinyangzi did not intend to make a big fuss over Shao Chen. However, he had now decided that even if he had to pay a price, he would do his best to find Shao Chen and bring him back safely. Such a peerless genius with a 99-meter talent was already worthy of the Tianyin and Taiyang sects making a big fuss over him. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. Chapter 12:35. Because of what was supposed to be a very simple talent test, Yinyangzi changed his mind. It was also because of this decision that Shao Chen received crucial help at the most dangerous time, allowing him to safely return to the human territory. Of course, this was all a story for later. After Qin Shuru and the other 2 girls finished their test, the talent test was finally over. In less than a day, the Sacred Palace had given the Heavenly Yin and Taiyang sect experts an unexpected shock. A quasi-saint sect that no one paid any attention to had suddenly produced so many monstrous geniuses. While the Heavenly Yin and Taiyang sect experts were shocked, they were also filled with curiosity towards the Sacred Palace. What was the reason for a small quasi-saint sect to nurture so many monstrous geniuses? With such curiosity in their hearts, the day's talent test was announced by Yinyangzi. At the same time, Gudu Weao and the other 2, as well as all the Sacred Palace chosen and saintesses, including Qin Shuru and the other 2 girls, were all qualified to cultivate in the Heavenly Yin and Taiyang sect. In addition, Shao Xing and the other 3, as well as the Sacred Palace Saint Sovereigns, had also become guest elders of the Heavenly Yin and Taiyang sect. They could also obtain the Heavenly Yin and Taiyang sect's cultivation resources, as well as use of various cultivation secret realms and so on. Not only did they accept Chun Ling and the other prodigies, but they also accepted Shao Xing and the other experts of the older generation into the Heavenly Yin and Taiyang sect as guest elders. This method of handling matters was actually inseparable from the heavenly Yin and Taiyang sect itself. Although the heavenly Yin and Taiyang sect seemed to be a sect force from the name alone, in reality, the heavenly Yin and Taiyang sect was more like an alliance. Apart from those who originally belonged to the heavenly Yin and Taiyang sect, the other disciples and guest elders of the heavenly Yin and Taiyang sect were just like the sacred palace. They were merely nominal members of the heavenly Yin and Taiyang sect. The structure was like an alliance, which led to many factions within the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. They seemed to be from the same sect, but in fact there were many conflicts on a daily basis. After all, each quasi-sage sect represented a faction in the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. Those who could enter the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect to cultivate were all outstanding talents of their respective quasi-sage sections. The heavenly Yin and solar sect didn't officially recruit them as disciples, but they provided them with cultivation resources and opened cultivation mystic realms. This might seem like a huge loss, but that wasn't the case. While enjoying the resources of the Yin and Yang sects, these disciples and guest elders also had to complete the missions given by the Yin and Yang sects from time to time. It could be said that the structure of the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect was like an alliance. Not only did it reduce a lot of daily management troubles, but it also increased the strength of the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect in a short period of time. Furthermore, it also connected the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect with the many affiliated sections. Many quasi-sage sects gathered under the banner of the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect and huddled together for warmth. The heavenly Yin Taiyang sect had undoubtedly become their leader. It seemed like a loss, but it was actually very smart. Moreover, there was no need to run away from the fact that the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect would fall into the hands of others. As long as Yin Yangzi was still alive, there would always be only one voice in the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. Moreover, although there were many factions in the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect, the main faction would always occupy the leading position. This was also Yin Yangzi's brilliance. After the test ended, everyone dispersed one after another. Chun Ling and the others would also be heading to the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect in a few days. Qin Shuru and the other two girls accompanied them. Their 95-meter talent made the three girls become rare peerless prodigies in the eyes of the powerhouses of the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. The main reason Qin Shuru and the other two girls participated in this test was actually because of Xiao Chen's disappearance. Xiao Chen's disappearance made the three girls realize a problem. This was no longer the North Star boundary, but the central world. This was the center of the world, where powerhouses from various races gathered and prodigies from various races were as common as clouds. On such a big stage, Xiao Chen was no longer the number one holy son of the sacred palace that no one dared to provoke in the North Star boundary. The three girls also didn't want to need Xiao Chen's protection every time they encountered danger in the future. They also wanted to fight side by side with Xiao Chen, and strength was a must to achieve this. Therefore, the three girls came to participate in this talent test and used their own talents to attract the attention of the powerhouses of the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect in order to exchange for a better cultivation environment and cultivation resources for themselves. The three girls wanted to become stronger. They wanted to be on the same level as Tian Yu and be able to fight side by side with Xiao Chen. They didn't want to be a vase or a burden to Xiao Chen. Although they also knew that they couldn't reach Xiao Chen's level, let alone surpass Xiao Chen, the three girls only wanted a chance to stand by Xiao Chen's side. They only hoped to be able to closely follow in Xiao Chen's footsteps. They didn't know what had happened in the sacred palace, nor did they know that after the talent test, Yin Yangzi directly ordered the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect and all subordinate sects to search for Xiao Chen's whereabouts with all their strength. They also mobilized the spies hidden in the various races' territories to use special channels to inquire about Xiao Chen's whereabouts. Once they discovered Xiao Chen's whereabouts, they would immediately send Xiao Chen safely back to the human race's territory. Xiao Chen was still oblivious to the fact that Yin Yangzi had mobilized all of their forces for him. After several days of traveling, Xiao Chen gradually ventured deep into the territory of the beast race. Along the way, just as Xiao Chen had expected, most of the beasts were not surprised when they saw Xiao Chen. After all, there were quite a number of beasts in the beast's territory who had taken human form. Xiao Chen and Tian Yu did not attract much attention. The journey was quite smooth. On this day, Xiao Chen and Tian Yu arrived at a city called Wang Yu City. The beast race was actually a very interesting race. They were clearly stronger than the human race, but for some reason, the beast race liked to imitate the human race. It wasn't just because they had taken human form, but also because the beast race liked to imitate the human race's speech and living habits after taking human form. Therefore, the beast race's city was actually not much different from the human race's city. The only difference was that there were some low-level monsters that had yet to take human form in the beast race's city. Walking on the streets of Wang Yu City, Xiao Chen really would have thought that this was a human city. After all, it was too similar. Just as Xiao Chen and Tian Yu were looking at the shops on both sides of the street and looking for an inn to stay at tonight, they suddenly heard an angry scolding. "Little brat, you're courting death. How dare you come to our Linfeng restaurant to eat and drink? I'll beat you to death today. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 1236. Brothers, I caught a cold and had a fever. This afternoon, I went to get an injection. Originally, I wanted to come back and continue writing, but I really couldn't hold on. My head is very dizzy, and I completely can't write. The original 2 chapters that I had saved up were all sent out. The remaining 2 chapters can only be owed. Brothers, please forgive me. I'm really powerless. I have to go and sleep. Finally, I hope that brothers can pay more attention to their own bodies and don't get sick. Because being sick is really a very, very uncomfortable thing. Sword Master 8 Desolation's request for leave. Please wait for a moment. After the content is updated, please refresh the page to get the latest update. Chapter 1237. The clamorous sounds of beating and cursing quickly drew Xiao Chen's attention. He looked towards the source of the sound and saw a young man in embroidered clothes being pressed down on the ground and bashed up by a few robust men. It wasn't difficult to discern from the furious curses of the robust men that the young man had probably eaten a free meal. However, Xiao Chen was slightly curious because those robust men were merely at the Taoist realm, yet the young man in embroidered clothes was at the advanced stage of the Tao Emperor realm. They weren't on the same level at all. With the young man's cultivation, he could casually crush those robust men, but it just so happened that the young man didn't have any intention to fight back. A young genius at the advanced stage of the Tao Emperor realm was actually being bashed up by a few ants at the Taoist realm. This was slightly strange indeed, and the spectators in the surroundings were discussing this in low voices. It's that kid again. He really isn't afraid of death. He actually came to the Phoenix Pavilion to freeload again. The spectators in the surroundings discussed in low voices. Based on what they said, it seemed like this wasn't the first time the young man had come to the Phoenix Pavilion to eat a free meal. The Phoenix Pavilion was the largest restaurant in Kingly Harmony City. Not only did it have fine wine and delicacies, there were even many beautiful young women from the beast race there. The Phoenix Pavilion was extremely famous in Kingly Harmony City. Xiao Chen was merely slightly curious, and he didn't intend to meddle in the business of others. Even though he was puzzled as to why the young man in embroidered clothes didn't fight back, and based on the young man's appearance and dressing, he didn't seem like someone who lacked money, so why would he eat a free meal? He was slightly puzzled, but all of this had nothing to do with Xiao Chen. So, he merely stood there and took a few glances before Xiao Chen strode away with the intention of leaving. The most important thing right now was to return to the human territory as soon as possible. That was the most important thing, and everything else wasn't important. Xiao Chun intended to leave. Right when he was about to brush past the young man in embroidered clothes, who was originally completely indifferent, seemed to have sensed something. He first glanced at Xiao Chun, and then a strand of force erupted from his body and forcefully blasted the robust men in the surroundings away. The robust men were surprised that they were blasted away for no rhyme or reason, but none of them had imagined that it was the young man in embroidered clothes. After all, it wasn't the first time they'd bashed the young man in embroidered clothes, and the young man in embroidered clothes hadn't been able to fight back at all. Obviously, none of them felt that he was an expert. However, the young man in embroidered clothes had already arrived before Xiao Chun and grabbed Xiao Chun's arm. Brothers, brother, you've finally come. If you hadn't come, I would have been beaten to death. Xiao Chun frowned when he heard the young man in embroidered clothes' words. He didn't know this person, but the young man in embroidered clothes had bluntly called him brother. Xiao Chun did not reply, but the few burly men from before had already strode over at this time. They all looked at Xiao Chun with unfriendly expressions as they shouted, "Kid, you're this guy's brother? Well, since that's the case, you'll pay for all his expenses in Lin Feng House." They treated Xiao Chun as the young man in embroidered clothes' brother. Therefore, the young man in embroidered clothes' expenses in Lin Feng House naturally had to be paid for by Xiao Chun. A cold glint flashed across Xiao Chun's eyes when he heard the robust men's words. How dare a few ants in the Dao Gate realm act so presumptuously in front of him? Moreover, Xiao Chun was a little displeased with the young man in embroidered clothes. Originally, he had nothing to do with this matter, but now, he had to suffer an unexpected calamity. If it was any other time, Xiao Chun would have dealt with these ants without a second thought. However, he couldn't do so now. He had been expelled from the beast race's territory, and Xiao Chun didn't want to cause any trouble. Moreover, once he made a move, it was very likely that his identity would be exposed. Therefore, Xiao Chun didn't say anything in the face of the robust men's reprimand. He immediately took out 100 mid-grade spirit stones from his storage ring and casually threw them to the robust men. Is this enough? 100 mid-grade spirit stones. Seeing this, the robust men's expressions softened a little. Then, they looked at the young man in embroidered clothes and said, "Kid, consider yourself lucky today. If you dare to come to my Lin Feng house to eat and drink in the future, be careful not to break your legs." With that, the robust men took the spirit stones and turned around to leave. Seeing this, Xiao Chun also prepared to leave. Although he had been cheated by the young man in embroidered clothes, Xiao Chun didn't have any intention to bicker with him. Unfortunately, even though Xiao Chun didn't intend to bicker with the young man in embroidered clothes, the young man in embroidered clothes was a little unforgiving. Xiao Chun had already paid for him, but the young man in embroidered clothes had no intention of leaving. Instead, he followed behind Xiao Chun step by step. Seeing the young man in embroidered clothes following him, Xiao Chun felt a little angry in his heart. However, at the same time, he also felt a little strange. Logically speaking, the young man in embroidered clothes had taken the initiative to call him brother because he wanted him to pay for him. However, now that he had already paid for the favor, why was he still following him? Perhaps his objective wasn't to pay from the beginning. As he pondered in his heart, Tian Yu's expression gradually turned cold as she spoke from the side. "Husband, should we make a move and deal with him?" Killing intent had clearly arisen in Tian Yu's heart when she saw an inexplicable person following her. Even though the young man in embroidered clothes possessed a cultivation at the advanced stage of the Dao Emperor realm, both Xiao Chun and Tian Yu were confident in their ability to kill him. However, when he heard Tian Yu, Xiao Chun shook his head instead. This was Royal Harmony City, and fighting here would obviously draw a great deal of unnecessary trouble. Moreover, Xiao Chun kept having the feeling that the young man's identity was probably not simple. He allowed the young man to follow him, and the young man seemed to have become familiar with Xiao Chen. Not only did he not notice the killing intent that Tian Yu unconsciously emanated, he even chatted with Xiao Chen with a warm expression. "Brother, I really have to thank you for earlier. Why don't I treat you to a meal? There's a restaurant in Royal Harmony City, and their wine is very good. How about it? I'll treat you." All along the way, the young man spoke to himself, and Xiao Chen and Tian Yu paid no attention to him at all. They arrived at a restaurant, and Xiao Chen entered and asked for a private room. The young man didn't regard himself as an outsider at all as he followed Xiao Chen and Tian Yu into the room. The three of them sat down. At this moment, there was no one else present. Xiao Chen looked at the young man in embroidered clothes and asked indifferently, "Why are you following us?" All along the way, the young man gave others the feeling that he was a street vendor. He had a handsome appearance, yet he gave others the feeling that he was extremely wretched. However, when he heard Xiao Chen's words, the wretched appearance on the young man's face instantly vanished, and it was replaced by an indifferent and noble bearing. A wisp of a smile appeared on the corners of the young man's mouth as he looked at Xiao Chen and said, "I'm really curious. As a human, why do you have the aura of a pure-blooded dragon? I had another injection this morning, and it's much better than yesterday. When I came back, I insisted on writing an article. I'll take a nap now and write it in the afternoon. There shouldn't be a problem with the 4th chapter today. As for the 2 chapters that I owe yesterday, I'll make them up after I recover." Chapter 12:38. The young man gave Xiao Chen a very strange feeling. How should he put it? Firstly, the young man's appearance could absolutely be described as extremely handsome. No matter how handsome he was, the young man had always given others an extremely wretched feeling while possessing such a handsome appearance. It was like fire and water. A handsome appearance and a wretched bearing shouldn't have appeared on the same person, yet it just so happened that the young man before him had accomplished it. The young man possessed a cultivation at the advanced stage of the Tao Emperor realm, but for some unknown reason, Xiao Chen instinctively felt danger when he faced the young man. It was quite laughable when he thought about it because he actually felt danger from a person at the advanced stage of the Tao Emperor realm. It was truly a very strange thing. Moreover, the young man seemed to have instantly become a different person. The wretched feeling he had from before had vanished without a trace, and his bearing had undergone a tremendous change as well. However, this wasn't the thing that surprised Xiao Chen the most. The thing that surprised him the most was the young man's words. "I'm truly curious. Why does a human like you possess the aura of a pure-blooded dragon?" The young man spoke. A wisp of killing intent flashed through Xiao Chen's eyes when he heard this. The young man had seen through his identity as a human. Once his identity as a human was exposed in the territory of the beast race, it would definitely be extremely troublesome. So, for a time, Xiao Chen aroused the intention to silence the young man. As if he'd sensed the killing intent in Xiao Chen's eyes, the young man didn't mind at all and grinned as he spoke. "It's best to think clearly before you act. I know both of you are very strong, but even if both of you join forces, you're probably not a match for me." He didn't change his expression at all because of Xiao Chen's killing intent. Conversely, the young man seemed as if he didn't take Xiao Chen and Tian Yu seriously at all, and he spoke frankly that even if Xiao Chen and Tian Yu joined forces, they wouldn't be a match for him. He knew that Xiao Chen and Tian Yu weren't simple, but the young man wasn't afraid at all. Moreover, based on his expression when he spoke, it didn't seem like he was bluffing at all. This was extremely strange. The young man was clearly only at the advanced stage of the Tao Emperor realm, yet he actually dared to speak such words. After all, advanced stage Tao Emperors possessed cultivations that were even lower than Xiao Chen. In this way, Xiao Chen was even confident in his ability to defeat a top genius. After all, with Xiao Chen's natural talent and combat strength, He wasn't afraid of anyone at the same cultivation realm, let alone surmount a realm be defeated. Xiao Chun stared fixedly at the young man. At this point, he was roughly able to guess why the young man had approached him. The young man had probably seen through his identity since the beginning, and the young man had sensed the thin aura of a pure-blood dragon within him. If it was said why Xiao Chun possessed the aura of a pure-blood dragon, then the reason was very simple. It was naturally because he'd been with Long Qing for such a long time, so it was very normal for him to be tainted by her aura. Not to mention that Xiao Chun had even used Long Qing's blood essence to cultivate in the past. Xiao Chun gazed indifferently at the young man and said indifferently, "Since you knew my identity since the beginning yet didn't make a move against me and only spoke of it now, then it looks like you don't have any ill intent towards me." The young man had only spoken of Xiao Chun's identity when there was no one else in the surroundings, and he hadn't told anyone about it. So, he clearly didn't have any ill intent towards Xiao Chun. Hearing this, the young man smiled slightly and said, "I'm not interested in your identity as a human. I just want to know where the aura of a pure-blood dragon on you comes from." What the young man was interested in was not Xiao Chun, but the aura of a dragon on Xiao Chun's body. Although the aura was very weak, the young man could still sense that it was extremely pure. It was definitely a pure-blood dragon that was directly related to the Dragon Emperor's bloodline. The pure-blood dragons of the Dragon Emperor's bloodline, to put it bluntly, were the royal members of the Dragon Clan. Every single one of them had an extremely noble status, and at the same time, the power of their bloodline was also the purest. Of course, there were very few pure-blood dragons of the Dragon Emperor's bloodline. Up until now, there were only 3 people in the younger generation of the Dragon Emperor's bloodline. There were so few of them, but today, the young man had sensed the aura of a dragon from the Dragon Emperor's bloodline that he had never encountered before from Xiao Chun. This naturally attracted his attention, because he himself was a dragon from the Dragon Emperor's bloodline. He had no intention of hiding it from Xiao Chun. As soon as he finished speaking, a faint pressure of a dragon immediately spread out from the young man's body. The pressure was very faint under the young man's intentional control, but it was enough for Xiao Chun to sense it clearly. Xiao Chun frowned slightly when he sensed the pressure of a dragon from the young man's body. He had guessed the young man's identity before, but when he truly sensed the familiar aura of a dragon from the young man, Xiao Chun could not help but feel a little shocked. The young man's pressure was extremely similar to Long Qing's, almost exactly the same. However, Xiao Chun, who had long been used to Long Qing's aura, could clearly sense that the power of the bloodline on the young man's body seemed to be even more terrifying than Long Qing's. This was the first time that Xiao Chun witnessed a dragon's pressure that was even more terrifying than Long Qing's. In this case, the young man had also revealed his identity. He was a pure-blooded dragon. After revealing his identity, the young man concealed his aura and gazed at Xiao Chun indifferently, waiting for Xiao Chun's answer. Xiao Chun finally understood the young man's intentions. But now, he was hesitant about telling the young man about Long Qing. After all, even though the young man was a pure-blooded dragon and could be said to be of the same bloodline as Long Qing, Xiao Chun had never come into contact with a real dragon and didn't know the situation within the dragon race. If he were to rashly tell the young man about Long Qing, would it put Long Qing in danger? Xiao Chun was in a dilemma. But shortly after, he made up his mind. Since the young man recognized his identity and was also a pure-blooded dragon, he should have a high status in the beast race. If he could, at this thought, Xiao Chun looked at the young man and said, "I do know a pure-blooded dragon, but I won't tell you anything now. If you wish to meet her, follow me to the human territory. But I don't know if you have the guts to do so." Xiao Chun admitted that he knew a pure-blooded dragon. But from start to finish, he didn't reveal a single word about Long Qing. Upon hearing Xiao Chun's words, the young man smiled faintly. "You want me to send you out of the beast race's territory, right?" His words revealed Xiao Chen's thoughts. That's right, Xiao Chen did want the young man to send him out of the beast race's territory. Since he was a pure-blooded dragon, with his identity, it shouldn't be difficult for him to help him leave the beast race's territory. As for whether he dared to meet Long Qing in the sacred palace, that wasn't for Xiao Chen to think about. Of course, Xiao Chen had no intention of harming the young man. The premise was that he didn't pose any threat to Long Qing or had any other ill intentions. Collectible, monthly votes recommendations. Chapter 1239. The young man revealed Xiao Chen's thoughts with a single sentence. Xiao Chen didn't refute it. Instead, he nodded and admitted it calmly. I want you to send us out of the beast territory. Of course, it's fine if you're unwilling. Aren't you afraid that I'll force you to stay? The young man wasn't angry because he'd been used by Xiao Chen at all. Instead, he continued to speak with a smile on his face. Force Xiao Chen and Tianyu to stay? It was indeed slightly funny when it came from a person at the mastery of the Tao Emperor realm. However, for some reason, Xiao Chen didn't think that the young man was joking. However, since he'd already spoken, Xiao Chen didn't continue hiding it and replied with a smile on his face as well. You can try. Even though you give me a very extraordinary feeling, not everyone can bully us. I think you won't be able to gain any advantage if we fight. The young man was extraordinary, but Xiao Chen wouldn't belittle himself. With his and Tianyu's strength, Xiao Chen was confident that he could fight the young man. However, Xiao Chen clearly didn't know who the young man before him was. Moreover, the young man wasn't boasting. Xiao Chen and Tianyu weren't bad, but they were nothing compared to him. He was confident and capable of taking down Xiao Chen and Tianyu. Xiao Chen still didn't know the identity of the young man before him, and the young man seemed unwilling to tell him. The young man immediately laughed when he heard Xiao Chen. Haha. All right, I'll accompany you to the human territory and see that pure-blooded dragon with my own eyes. The young man agreed without the slightest hesitation or fear. Xiao Chen was stunned when he heard this. However, the young man took the initiative to stretch out his hand and said, Since we've decided to travel together, let's get to know each other. I'm Long Yang. Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen stretched out his hand and shook Long Yang's hand lightly. They could be considered to have gotten to know each other. Next, Long Yang looked at Tianyu and revealed a wretched smile on his face. His entire temperament changed in an instant. Looking at Tianyu, the saliva at the corner of his mouth seemed to be dripping down. He stretched out his hand and smiled. This beautiful young lady of the Tian clan, I am Long Yang. May I have the honor of knowing your name? Previously, he still had an indifferent and domineering appearance. In the blink of an eye, he had turned into an extremely wretched hooligan. Facing Long Yang in front of him, Tianyu did not give him any face. Without even looking at him, he coldly shouted, Scram! All right. Long Yang was not angry when he heard Tianyu's words. Instead, he said with a smile on his face. After he finished speaking, he did not bother Tianyu anymore. Instead, he returned to his seat and began chatting with Xiao Chen. If the previous Long Yang did give Xiao Chen an indescribable sense of danger, then now, Xiao Chen's impression of Long Yang could only be described with one word. Wretched, extremely wretched, extremely wretched. After the dishes were served, Xiao Chen and the other two drank and chatted. However, most of the time, it was Long Yang who was blowing his own trumpet. Brother Xiao Chen, come, let's drink this cup. We really hit it off at first sight. Haha. Brother Xiao Chen, it's rare for you to come to the Beast Clan's territory. No matter what, I have to treat you well. It's not that I want to brag, but in the Beast Clan's territory, I am undoubtedly the #1 person in the apricot forest. People call me the little white dragon of the wave. Oh right, Brother Xiao Chen, don't you humans have a saying? People don't need oars to row a boat. They rely on the waves. Throughout the meal, Long Yang was the one bragging. Most of the time, he talked about how he had wandered the Beast Clan's territory. He didn't care about Tianyu in the slightest. In the end, Tianyu smashed the cup in her hand with a bang. She looked coldly at Long Yang, then turned her gaze to Xiao Chen. A chill unconsciously spread out from Tianyu's body. Feeling the chill and looking at Tianyu's sharp and cold eyes, Xiao Chen smiled embarrassedly and said, "That's right. Madam, I didn't say anything." He knew that Tianyu was angry because of Long Yang's words. When he thought about it, it made sense. Long Yang's wife was sitting right next to him, and Long Yang was talking about his experience in the brothel. If it were anyone else, they would probably be angry. When she heard Xiao Chen's words, Tianyu sneered. "Is that so? I see that you're already bursting with joy, aren't you?" After saying that, without waiting for Xiao Chen to reply, Tianyu turned to look at Long Yang. Her tone became colder and colder, and even carried a hint of killing intent. "If you dare to say another word about the Beast Clan's affairs, I will cut off your tongue." Tianyu's words were obviously not a joke. Although Long Yang gave people a very mysterious feeling and wasn't simple, but one should never underestimate an angry woman. Moreover, one shouldn't provoke an angry woman. Hearing Tianyu's words, Long Yang smiled awkwardly and said, "Haha, I understand." During the meal, Long Yang bragged about himself in the first half, but because of Tianyu, Long Yang became much more honest in the second half. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, the three of them prepared to leave Wangyu City. In fact, Xiao Chen was very curious about Long Yang's promise to follow him to the human territory. This was just like how Xiao Chen and Tianyu were now in the Beast Clan's territory. It was absolutely dangerous for the Beast Clan to go to the human territory. He didn't believe that Long Yang didn't know the danger, but he still agreed without the slightest rejection. This made Xiao Chen very curious. He didn't know where Long Yang's confidence came from. However, Xiao Chen didn't ask about this. Now wasn't the time to care about this. On the same day, the three of them left Wangyu City and used the transportation array. Of course, this was all thanks to Long Yang. Without Long Yang, Xiao Chen and Tianyu wouldn't have been able to use the transportation array. However, Xiao Chen was still curious about one thing. With Long Yang's status, why was he beaten up like that in Lin Feng restaurant? One must know that although the Phoenix Pavilion was the largest restaurant in Yueqing and its strength wasn't bad, Long Yang was a pure-blooded dragon. How could the Full Moon Pavilion have the guts to beat up a pure-blooded dragon? Moreover, Long Yang didn't fight back? Furthermore, Long Yang was definitely not someone who lacked money. A pure-blooded dragon actually dined and dashed. This was an extremely strange thing. In any case, for Xiao Chen, Long Yang's actions made him feel strange. However, Xiao Chen obviously didn't expect that he would soon understand everything. In other words, Xiao Chen felt that Long Yang was a strange existence. It could be said that he had completely subverted Xiao Chen's worldview and almost made Xiao Chen doubt his life. Seeking collection, seeking monthly votes, seeking recommendations. Chapter 1240. With Long Yang's presence, Xiao Chen and Tianyu were indeed much safer. After all, not many people in the beast race's territory dared to provoke a pureblood dragon. Xiao Chen, Tianyu, and Tianyu made their way to the human race's territory through the teleportation formation. Originally, with the help of the teleportation formation, Xiao Chen, Tianyu, and Tianyu could enter the human race's territory in just a few days. However, after half a month, the three of them still hadn't arrived at the human race's territory. They hadn't even reached the border between the two races' territories. Their speed was very slow. As for why it was so, it was entirely because of Long Yang. This was because Long Yang had to stop and play for 2 days in every city they passed. This made Xiao Chen and Tianyu both angry and helpless. It wasn't that Long Yang had never been angry before. However, in the face of Xiao Chen and Tianyu's anger, Long Yang didn't care at all. This guy was stubborn. Long Yang was unmoved by force or persuasion. Every time Long Yang visited a city, the places he visited were, without a doubt, the brothels. Xiao Chen, on the other hand, had witnessed what it meant to be a real talent in this process. He had never seen someone who could dine and dash in such a refreshing and refined manner. Moreover, not only did Long Yang not pay for his meals, he didn't even pay for his women. He was a living rogue. Moreover, Long Yang didn't fight back when the restaurant's guards beat him up. In his words, these 2 or 3 kittens were just scratching an itch for him. Xiao Chen was completely helpless against a guy who lived off women and wasn't afraid of being beaten up. He could only say that it was the restaurant's misfortune to meet this guy. They could only admit that they were unlucky to have met this guy. After spending half a month together, Xiao Chen didn't ask Long Yang why he wanted to dine and dash. Logically speaking, with his identity as a pure-blood dragon, he shouldn't be short of money. In the face of Xiao Chen's question, Long Yang said indifferently, "It's nothing. My wife insisted that I marry someone I don't like. I ran away from the marriage, so she cut off my spiritual stones and spread the word that no one can help me." Ran away from the marriage? Upon hearing this, Xiao Chen was taken aback. Did beasts run away from marriage? But on second thought, this was normal. After all, the beast race liked to learn human culture. However, because she ran away from the marriage, all her financial resources were cut off. As for the family that Long Yang mentioned, it should be his elders. As a pure-blooded dragon, Long Yang's elders were obviously not ordinary people. In the face of a pure-blooded dragon's orders, no one in the entire beast race would dare to disobey. Furthermore, Xiao Chen did not know that the person Long Yang was running away from was a princess of the Phoenix Huang Yi clan. With the Dragon clan and the Phoenix Huang Yi clan, no one would dare to offend them. Not to mention the beast race, even the other races would have to reconsider. As such, it was not strange that Long Yang was penniless. After all, 2 of the 3 strongest clans of the beast race had attacked Long Yang at the same time. The consequences could be imagined. However, the Dragon clan and the Phoenix clan probably didn't expect that Long Yang wasn't someone who was easy to deal with. So what if he didn't have money? He was still indulging in wine and women. This was Long Yang's ability. Xiao Chen did not know what to say about Long Yang. In short, this guy was a talent. To be able to live so well under the double suppression of the Dragon clan and the Phoenix Huang Yi clan was indeed not something an ordinary person could do. In addition, from the conversation with Long Yang, Xiao Chen also knew why he had never revealed his identity as a dragon. The reason was very simple. He ran away. Once his trace was exposed, it did not take long. Within 2 hours, the Dragon clan and the Phoenix Huang Yi clan's experts would definitely arrive. By then, he would have no choice but to go back and get married. They gradually got to know each other better. Xiao Chen also told Long Yang about the sacred palace after learning more about Long Yang. He explained that he was not from the Central World, but had come to the Central World because of the 100 Race War. This was not a secret, so it was not a big deal to tell Long Yang. After hearing this, Long Yang did not react strangely, as if he had already expected this. As time passed, Xiao Chen and Long Yang got closer and closer to the human territory. On this day, the 3 of them arrived at a city called Lu City. This was already the border of the beast race's territory. From Lu City, it would only take a day to enter the human territory. It was also because Lu City was so close to the human territory that they could see the figures of the human race in Lu City. Moreover, there were quite a few of them. Lu City was located at the border between the 2 races' territories. Although Lu City was nominally under the control of the beast race, it was actually a place where both races lived together. In Lu City, the human race and beast race coexisted, and both sides seemed to have a harmonious relationship. They had finally safely returned to the human territory. Now that they had arrived at Lo City, Xiao Chen was not worried about anything even if his identity was exposed. After all, the human race was not a rare existence in Lo City and could be seen everywhere on the street. They drank in a restaurant, planning to rest here for a day before setting off for the human territory the next day. As they drank, Xiao Chen looked at Long Yang in front of him. Long Yang was currently staring at the human girl at the next table with a perverted expression, sending her a teasing glance from time to time. "Brother Long Yang, are you sure you want to go to the human territory with me?" Seeing Long Yang's wretched expression, Xiao Chen asked as if it was nothing out of the ordinary. Long Yang had always been like this along the way. After hearing Xiao Chen's words, Long Yang unwillingly withdrew his gaze after a long while. He looked at Xiao Chen and smiled, "Of course. Since we're already here, is there any reason not to go? Brother Xiao Chen, are you going back on your word?" "Why would I go back on my word? However, aren't you worried about your safety in the human territory?" Xiao Chen said unhappily. "Haha, don't worry. The world is so big, where can I not go?" Long Yang laughed heartily. He was not worried about the dangers of going to the human territory at all. It was as if the powerful beings of the human race would not dare to do anything to him. Seeing Long Yang's confident face, Xiao Chen did not say anything more. However, he thought to himself that if there were any accidents, he would help Long Yang as much as he could. At least, he would let Long Yang leave the human territory safely. Xiao Chen did not have a deep relationship with Long Yang, and both of them were reserved when they talked. However, he was a very simple person. "If you were good to me, I would naturally be good to you." Along the way, although Long Yang seemed very unreliable, he had indeed helped him a lot and brought him safely to Lo City. As such, if Long Yang encountered any danger in the human territory, Xiao Chen would naturally not stand by and watch. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1241. Long Yang didn't seem to be worried about heading to the human territory at all. Upon seeing his attitude, Xiao Chen didn't say anything else. Since Long Yang wasn't afraid of heading to the human territory, he should have his own confidence. Xiao Chen initially intended to persuade Long Yang not to head to the human territory. But now, it seemed that persuasion wouldn't be of much use, so he might as well not say anything. The two of them continued to drink. At the same time, a group of young women dressed in red appeared at the city gate of Joy City. The appearance of this group of young women quickly attracted the attention of many people. Be it humans or beasts, everyone outside the city gate turned their attention to this group of young women who were strolling into the city. There were a total of 13 of them, all dressed in red, tight-fitting clothes. Every young woman could be said to be extremely beautiful, but the most eye-catching one was naturally the leader. She had a delicate face that wasn't inferior to Qin Shuru Tianyu and the other two young ladies. But at that moment, this young woman's face was covered in frost and her large, lively eyes were filled with chilliness. In the face of such a devastatingly beautiful woman, it was understandable for men to crowd around her. But if one were to observe the changes in the expressions of the people around her carefully, it wasn't difficult to discover that not only were there no covetous looks in the eyes of the men, but they were also filled with fear as though they had seen a terrifying existence. Moreover, when she entered the city, the beasts in charge of guarding the city gate didn't dare to stop her at all. They didn't even question her and respectfully invited her into the city. That's right, they invited her in. When the guards faced the young woman, they were no different from slaves. Who are these women? They are all so beautiful. Most of the people revealed fearful expressions, but someone still spoke softly. But as soon as that person spoke, an elder beside him said in a deep voice, "Are you courting death? She is from the Feng Huang Yi clan." Feng Huang Yi clan. Hearing this, the expression of the person who spoke earlier changed, and he didn't dare to say anything else. It was precisely because many people recognized the identity of this group of girls. The red clothes they wore, as well as the small fiery red phoenix embroidery on their chests, showed that they were from the Phoenix Huang-Yi clan. In the territory of the Beast race, the Dragon race, the Phoenix race, the Huang-Yi race, and the Qilin race were existences that absolutely could not be provoked. Just like the three masters of the human race, they were the strongest forces that stood at the peak of the central world. Moreover, nothing had happened to them for hundreds of thousands of years. The depth of their foundation was unimaginable. So they were from the Feng Huang-Yi clan. It made sense that no one dared to stop them. However, Lu City was located at the border. Why would the Feng Huang-Yi clan come here? Outsiders knew very little about the Feng Huang-Yi clan. Therefore, the shocked crowd didn't know that this group of people weren't ordinary members of the Feng Huang-Yi clan. Especially the peerless beauty leading the group. Her identity was even more unexpected. The woman's name was Feng Ju. She was a true descendant of the Feng Huang-Yi clan, and was known as the strongest among the younger generation of the Huang-Yi clan. She was ranked 6th on the Saint rankings. Obviously, they didn't know Feng Ju's identity. If they did, it was likely that they wouldn't be able to remain calm. The arrival of such a big figure in Lu City naturally caused quite a commotion. However, Xiao Chen and the other two didn't know anything about this. At this moment, the three of them had already eaten their fill in the restaurant and were preparing to find an inn to stay in. They were only waiting for the next morning to set off for the human territory. Just as they walked out of the restaurant, Xiao Chen saw that there wasn't a single person outside the restaurant. 12 young girls in red tight-fitting clothes had surrounded the entrance of the restaurant. At the same time, Feng Ju's face, which wasn't inferior to Tian Yu's beauty, was coldly looking at the three of them. This sudden change caused Xiao Chen to be unable to react for a moment. However, at this moment, the princess of the Feng Huang-Yi clan, Feng Ju, had already coldly opened her mouth and said, "Long Yang, let's see where you can run to today." Long Yang? The moment Feng Ju opened her mouth, Xiao Chen suspiciously looked at Long Yang who was beside her. At the same time, Long Yang revealed a bitter smile. The trademark wretched expression on his face had also disappeared and was replaced with a helpless expression. Xiao Chen seemed to have guessed something. However, at this moment, Long Yang clearly didn't have the intention to explain. He stepped forward and smiled bitterly in front of Feng Ju. "My miss, what are you trying to do? I've already said that a forcefully picked melon won't be sweet. Why do you insist on clinging on to me and not letting go? With your qualifications in this central world, not to mention the beast race, even if it's the other races, as long as you say the word, I believe you can find any kind of husband. Why must you hang yourself on a crooked tree like me?" When Long Yang said this, Xiao Chen had already confirmed Feng Ju's identity. She should be Long Yang's fiancée, the princess of the Feng Huang-Yi clan. He already knew that Long Yang escaped from the marriage, but who would have thought that Feng Ju would chase him all the way here? Since he had already guessed Feng Ju's identity, Xiao Chen naturally wouldn't intervene in such a matter. After all, this was a matter between the two of them. Moreover, Xiao Chen didn't know Feng Ju, so it was even more impossible for him to intervene. Without any intention to step forward, Xiao Chen and Tian Yu stood in the same place. At the same time, after hearing Long Yang's words, Feng Ju's face became even colder. Her voice was like a silver bell, and at this time, it was also full of coldness. "Long Yang, what do you mean? You and I are already engaged. Now I am your fiancé. Today, I will only ask you one thing, will you marry me?" "I say, miss, you also know about the engagement that day. I was completely kept in the dark. I only drank a glass of wine. Who knew that we were engaged? This can't be counted." Hearing Feng Ju's words, Long Yang cried out that he was wronged. Looking at Long Yang's expression, it seemed that he was determined not to marry Feng Ju. Seeing this, Feng Ju strangely calmed down at this time, and said indifferently to Long Yang, "I will only ask you one thing, will you marry me or not?" Hearing Feng Ju's words, Long Yang directly shook his head and said without any hesitation, "No." Long Yang straightforwardly refused. And just as Long Yang's voice fell, Feng Ju's body exploded with a towering pressure. The power of the Feng Huang Yi clan's bloodline soared to the sky at this moment. Her eyes were slightly red, but more than that, there was anger. She said in an extremely cold voice, "Fine, Long Yang, today I will kill you first, then I will kill myself." Seeking collection, seeking monthly votes, seeking recommendation. Chapter 1242. Long Yang rejected Feng Ju without hesitation. Feng Ju didn't say a word and immediately attacked. Those who were familiar with Feng Ju would know that she was the little princess of the Huang Yi clan. She had a fiery temper. Now, for a man, Feng Ju could be said to have searched the entire beast race territory. But in the end, she was rejected by Long Yang. Without waiting for Long Yang's reply, Feng Ju had already made his move. The terrifying coercion of the Phoenix clan, as well as the cultivation of the semi-sage realm, made Feng Ju's move not any weaker than that of a Saint realm expert. Half-step sage realm. Xiao Chen murmured softly as he looked at Feng Ju. Feng Ju's age seemed to be about the same as his, but she was already a half-step sage realm expert. Moreover, cultivation was secondary. What was truly terrifying was the aura that Feng Ju emitted. It was obviously not an aura that an ordinary half-step Sage Realm expert could possess. Even many Sage Realm experts couldn't possess such a terrifying aura. They were all the top geniuses in this world. Therefore, as soon as Feng Ju's aura appeared, Xiao Chen felt Feng Ju's strength. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that Xiao Chen was very confident in himself, but if he were to face Feng Ju, there was absolutely no chance of winning. This was normal. One must know that Feng Ju was known as the strongest person among the younger generation of the Phoenix Huang Yi clan. That wasn't just for show. Moreover, Feng Ju was ranked 6th on the Saint rankings. In the Central World, as long as one was ranked on the Saint rankings, no one was simple. They could be said to be geniuses who were favored by the Heavenly Tao. If even the Heavenly Tao thought highly of them, how could their talent and strength be weak? Not to mention Feng Ju, who was ranked 6th on the Saint rankings. Feng Ju attacked with hatred. Scorching flames started to burn around his body, as if he wanted to burn the space. Under the scorching flames, the space around Feng Ju started to distort. Without showing the slightest mercy, Feng Ju struck out with her palm. The flames instantly condensed into the shape of a phoenix and rushed towards Long Yang. Facing Feng Ju's attack, Long Yang raised his eyebrows and immediately shouted, "Feng Ju, are you crazy?" "Yes, I'm crazy. Since you won't marry me, I'll kill you and then commit suicide." After hearing Long Yang's words, Feng Ju coldly replied. Obviously, Long Yang's rejection had made Feng Ju extremely angry. She was definitely a crazy woman. However, this wasn't the time to talk, because Feng Ju's attack was already heading towards Long Yang. Facing such a fierce attack, Long Yang didn't choose to dodge because Xiao Chen and Tian Yu were right behind him. If Long Yang chose to dodge, then Xiao Chen and Tian Yu would have to take Feng Ju's attack head-on. Therefore, Long Yang could only choose to take it head-on. Everyone was extremely puzzled. Long Yang, who was clearly only at the mastery of the Tao Emperor realm, was actually able to remain calm when facing Feng Ju's attack. Logically speaking, with Long Yang's cultivation, even if he possessed heaven-defying talent, it was impossible for him to surmount so many levels of cultivation to defeat Feng Ju. At the level of the hallowed rankings, cultivation was actually everything. If there was a difference of an entire level of cultivation, then there was absolutely no chance of victory. Surmounting levels of cultivation didn't exist for a chosen on the hallowed rankings. After all, which chosen on the hallowed rankings was an ordinary figure. It would be truly strange if one could surmount a level of cultivation to do so. A single level of cultivation was already like the difference between heaven and earth between the chosen on the hallowed rankings, let alone Long Yang and Feng Ju, who were 3 levels apart. It was even more impossible for them to fight. But very soon Long Yang gave an answer. An aura that wasn't inferior to Feng Ju's erupted from his body. Shockingly, his cultivation had also reached the half-saint realm. He wasn't at the mastery of the Tao Emperor realm. Long Yang's true cultivation was at the half-saint realm, and he'd been concealing his cultivation all along. Concealing one's cultivation wasn't rare in the central world. After all, there were all sorts of people in the world, and there would always be people who liked to pretend to be weak. However, to Xiao Chen's surprise, Long Yang's ability to conceal his cultivation was simply flawless. All along the way, Xiao Chen hadn't suspected Long Yang's true cultivation, but no matter how he sensed it, Long Yang was only at the mastery of the Tao Emperor realm. Such concealment techniques could absolutely be considered to be superb, and even Xiao Chen was unable to see through them. Revealing his true cultivation, Long Yang also fiercely punched out. Accompanied by the sound of a dragon's roar, a huge golden dragon directly rushed out from Long Yang's fist and violently collided with Feng Ju's flame phoenix. When the two collided, it wasn't as intense as expected. Long Yang's punch easily destroyed Feng Ju's flaming phoenix. At the same time, the golden dragon that hadn't dissipated charged towards Feng Ju. However, Long Yang took the initiative to withdraw it at the last moment. Feng Ju was ranked 6th on the hallowed rankings, so his strength was definitely extremely strong. Even so, Feng Ju was at a disadvantage against Long Yang. Even though it was merely a single move, the difference in strength between the two was obvious. After the brief exchange, Xiao Chen looked at Long Yang with a hint of fighting spirit in his eyes. He thought, so strong, so strong. The combat power that Long Yang displayed made Xiao Chen feel powerless for the first time among his peers. Although the age gap wasn't too big, Long Yang's strength was enough to completely crush him. However, apart from this feeling of powerlessness, Xiao Chen's fighting spirit also rose uncontrollably. He could already guess the identity of Long Yang and Feng Ju. Both of them possessed such strength at such a young age. Other than the chosen on the hallowed rankings, there was probably no one else in the central world who could do this. So these are the chosen on the hallowed rankings of the central world. Xiao Chen couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Back then, when Chen Ling told him about the chosen on the hallowed rankings, Xiao Chen actually snorted disdainfully. He always thought that since he was the #1 chosen in the Northern Star world, even if he wasn't as strong as the chosen on the hallowed rankings, he definitely wouldn't be too weak. But now, after witnessing the battle between Long Yang and Feng Ju, even though they only exchanged a single move, Xiao Chen was still incomparably astonished. The gap between them was ridiculously huge. No wonder when they first met, Long Yang said so fearlessly that even if Xiao Chen and Tian Yu joined forces, they wouldn't be a match for him. Long Yang wasn't bragging. He really did have the strength to do so. In the central world, as long as one didn't make it onto the hallowed rankings, one wouldn't be able to be called a chosen. This was because if the heavenly Tao didn't acknowledge you, the world wouldn't acknowledge you either. The chosen on the hallowed rankings were the true chosen in this world. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1243. Xiao Chen guessed that Feng Ju and Long Yang were both holy princes. However, there was one thing that he didn't expect, and that was their rankings on the holy rankings. Feng Ju was ranked 6th on the holy rankings, while Long Yang, who usually looked extremely wretched, was actually ranked 3rd on the holy rankings. Although there was only a difference of 3 places between 3rd and 6th, the gap between them wasn't as simple as it seemed on the surface. As mentioned before, once one was ranked in the top 3, they were on a completely different level. Who would have thought that a wretched person with no bottom line would actually be one of the top 3 on the holy rankings? Xiao Chun didn't know much about the holy rankings. What he knew was all from Chun Ling. Therefore, Xiao Chun naturally couldn't guess Long Yang's and Feng Zhu's exact rankings on the holy rankings. While Xiao Chun was secretly shocked by Long Yang's and Feng Zhu's strength, Long Yang, who had defeated Feng Zhu's attack with a single blow, didn't attack again. Instead, he said helplessly, "I say, Feng Zhu, what do you mean by this? The two of us are simply—" "I don't want to listen, brother Long Yang. That's not what you said when we were young. Back then, you said that you would marry me when we grew up." Long Yang wanted to persuade Feng Zhu, but before he could finish, Feng Zhu interrupted him. As he spoke, tears welled up in his eyes and his voice became choked with sobs. In fact, Long Yang and Feng Zhu were indeed childhood sweethearts, which was also the reason why Feng Zhu was so stubborn. The Dragon Clan and the Feng Huangyi clan had been friends for generations, and the descendants of the two clans were familiar with each other. This was the case for Long Yang and Feng Zhu. Both of them were the most talented people in their respective clans. Since young, they had displayed cultivation talent and bloodline power that others of the same generation couldn't match. It was also because they were destined to be outstanding talents from the moment they were born that Feng Zhu and Long Yang actually had a competitive relationship from the start. Of course, most of the time, it was Feng Zhu who wanted to surpass Long Yang. After all, with Long Yang's temperament, he obviously wouldn't care about these things. Since young, Feng Zhu had regarded Long Yang as his target to surpass. Unfortunately, even though Feng Zhu's talent was heaven-defying, he was still lacking a little bit compared to Long Yang. And it was this little bit of difference that made Feng Zhu unable to surpass Long Yang no matter how hard he tried. In the beginning, Feng Zhu would challenge Long Yang every year. But every time, Long Yang would win. Feng Zhu had never been able to defeat Long Yang. It was under such a premise that Feng Zhu developed a different kind of feelings for Long Yang over time. It was normal for a beauty to love a hero, especially for a woman like Feng Zhu, who was born extraordinary and had outstanding talent. The husband she imagined was naturally an indomitable expert. However, among the beasts of the same generation, only Long Yang met Feng Zhu's requirements. In addition, the two of them were innocent when they were young and often spent time together. Moreover, Feng Zhu was a beauty that could topple countries, so Long Yang naturally said some words of love to her. Perhaps these words were just ignorant jokes to Long Yang, but Feng Zhu firmly remembered them in her heart. Later, the two of them reached the age to talk about marriage. The experts of the Dragon Clan and the Phoenix Huangyi clan had a discussion and felt that the two of them were very compatible. So, they held an engagement ceremony for the two of them. It was supposed to be a very smooth thing because Feng Zhu wouldn't refuse this marriage at all. But no one thought that Long Yang would actually run away from the marriage, which caused the situation to become like this. Of course, a large part of the reason why the Dragon Clan and the Phoenix Huangyi clan agreed to let Long Yang and Feng Zhu get married was probably because of benefit. Because once the two of them got married, it meant that the relationship between the Dragon Clan and the Phoenix Huangyi clan would be closer. At that time, the two clans could also be closer together and advance and retreat together. When he was young, Long Yang did say that he would marry Feng Zhu when he grew up, but at that time, he was just teasing this little girl. Who would have thought that this little girl would take it seriously? At this time, hearing Feng Zhu's words, Long Yang was a little stunned, especially when he saw Feng Zhu's tear-stained face. Long Yang's heart softened and he didn't know what to say. However, it was impossible for Long Yang to agree to marry Feng Zhu now. It wasn't because Long Yang hated Feng Zhu, but because Long Yang really didn't plan to get married. In Long Yang's heart, his feelings for Feng Zhu were very complicated. If it was to say that he liked her, then there was definitely a little, but obviously it wasn't to the level of a lifetime. In addition, in Long Yang's opinion, marriage meant responsibility. A person would have more freedom, so Long Yang really didn't want to get married so early. Feng Ju changed from her previous cold anger to a tear-stained face. This made Long Yang a little overwhelmed. In the midst of helplessness, Long Yang turned his head to look at Xiao Chen. There was a touch of a demanding look in his eyes. Obviously, he wanted Xiao Chen to help him think of a way. However, in the face of Long Yang's request, Xiao Chen chuckled softly and said, "Brother Long Yang, how can you ask me about this matter? I can't help much. You are the expert in this aspect. Aren't you called the little white dragon of the waves?" Xiao Chen had roughly guessed the whole story, so he began to tease Long Yang. After all, Feng Ju was definitely not an enemy, and after a short contact, Xiao Chen was sure that Feng Ju really liked Long Yang. Originally, Long Yang wanted to ask Xiao Chen for help. However, after hearing his words, Long Yang almost vomited blood. Bad friend, this is definitely a bad friend. Long Yang was gloating. However, there was no other way. Long Yang went to Xiao Chen with a pleading face and pleaded bitterly, "Brother Xiao, I'm different. I'm just acting. I don't play with feelings. You and sister-in-law have such a good relationship. You must have a way, right?" "It's not that there is no way." Hearing this, Xiao Chen was silent for a moment, then whispered. Hearing this, Long Yang was delighted and immediately said to Xiao Chen, "That's great. Thank you very much, Brother Xiao. Sigh, don't be in such a hurry. There is a way, but there is no guarantee that it will succeed. Also, since I helped you, shouldn't Brother Long repay me a little?" Xiao Chen smiled. Sure. As long as Brother Xiao helps me settle this matter, I will agree to any conditions." Xiao Chen had a request, but Long Yang agreed to it without hesitation. He agreed very readily. Seeing this, Xiao Chen did not keep him in suspense and said softly, "Don't worry, my request is very simple. Brother Long, you just need to tell me about the Holy Ranking Board. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 1244. After personally witnessing Long Yang and Feng Ju's strength, Xiao Chen was even more curious about the saint ranking. He really wanted to know if the saints on the saint ranking were all monsters. Xiao Chen dared not say anything else, but there was one thing that Xiao Chen was sure of. When they fought just now, Long Yang and Feng Ju definitely did not use their full strength. Even so, Xiao Chen already felt a great amount of pressure. It was hard to imagine how strong Long Yang and Feng Ju would be if they went all out. Moreover, Long Yang and Feng Ju were people of the same generation. They were not much older than him. Because he had witnessed their strength, Xiao Chen was even more curious about the saint ranking. Moreover, the method that Xiao Chen mentioned was actually not much of a method. In any case, it would definitely not solve this matter. It would only slightly ease the relationship between Long Yang and Feng Ju. Xiao Chen had never thought of solving this matter perfectly because he could see that whether it was Long Yang or Feng Ju, they were both very stubborn people. Once they had decided on something, they would not change their minds. Therefore, whether it was to persuade Long Yang to marry Feng Ju or to persuade Feng Ju to give up on Long Yang, it was impossible. As such, Xiao Chen's method was just a delaying tactic. He also told Long Yang about this matter. However, Long Yang did not even think about it and nodded repeatedly in agreement. Okay. We will do as Brother Xiao says. As long as we can settle this little princess, we will do anything. Long Yang knew Feng Ju's character very well. Therefore, he did not expect Xiao Chen to persuade Feng Ju to give up in one go. After receiving Long Yang's reply, Xiao Chen nodded slightly and said, "Okay, I will give it a try." After saying that, Xiao Chen walked towards Feng Ju alone. During this time, Tian Yu was a little worried and wanted to follow beside Xiao Chen. However, she was stopped by Xiao Chen, indicating that Tian Yu was fine. Xiao Chen walked all the way until he was 5 steps away from Feng Ju. With regards to Xiao Chen, Feng Ju had clearly seen through his identity as a human. His attitude was somewhat cold as he said, "Scram." However, Xiao Chen didn't care about it at all. He simply said, "I came here because of your relationship with Brother Long Yang. But since you don't want to listen, then forget it. You two can fight among yourselves." With regards to Feng Ju, Xiao Chen didn't have the slightest intention of spoiling him. After speaking, without waiting for Feng Ju's reply, Xiao Chen directly turned around and was about to leave. However, at this time, Feng Ju's expression changed slightly, and he opened his mouth to call out to Xiao Chen. "Wait a minute." Feng Ju took the initiative to call out to Xiao Chen. Hearing this, Xiao Chen turned around and smiled. "What, Princess Feng Ju is willing to listen? I'm warning you, you better say something. If not, I will personally kill you today." Although he was very curious about what Xiao Chen wanted to say, Feng Ju still opened his mouth to threaten him. Originally, Feng Ju had a fiery temper. In addition, Xiao Chen was on the same side as Brother Long Yang, so Xiao Chen understood Feng Ju's attitude towards him. Xiao Chen said with a smile, "Princess, it's not too late to listen to what I have to say. I know it's impossible to persuade you and Brother Long Yang to take a step back, and I can also see that Brother Long Yang doesn't hate Princess. It's just that Brother Long Yang hasn't considered marriage yet. Since Brother Long Yang is now so resistant to marriage, why does Princess still want to force him? If Princess can change your method, I think it's not impossible for Brother Long Yang to take the initiative to propose marriage to Huang Yi in the future." Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Feng Ju couldn't help but ask anxiously, "If you want to do this, quickly say it." Obviously, Feng Ju's interest was piqued by Xiao Chen's words. Hearing this, Xiao Chen didn't keep him in suspense and continued to speak unhurriedly. "Princess, in fact, the more you force a man, the more he will resist. In that case, why don't Princess try to make a change? Since Brother Long Yang doesn't want to get married now, Princess can stay by his side. I don't think Brother Long Yang will chase you away, right? After being together for a long time, Brother Long Yang will be used to having Princess by his side. At that time, wouldn't everything fall into place?" Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Princess Feng Ju's eyes became brighter and brighter. In the end, she couldn't help but clap her hands and cheer. "Good idea, why didn't this princess think of it? Human, you really have a way. Good, this princess will remember this. If there's anything in the future, you can tell this princess. This princess will protect you." As she spoke, Princess Feng Ju didn't forget to pat Xiao Chen's shoulder happily. In this regard, Xiao Chen could only smile bitterly. This little princess of the Feng Huang Yi clan looked cold and unapproachable, but he didn't expect her to have a lively personality. Daring to love, daring to hate, and doing things decisively. This was Xiao Chen's initial evaluation of Princess Feng Ju. Although Princess Feng Ju's personality was definitely not good, and was even a little unruly, such a woman was indeed difficult to hate. He had successfully convinced Princess Fengjue. Not far away, Long Yang was so shocked that his jaw almost dropped when he saw Princess Fengjue, who had a cold look on her face before, patting Xiao Chen on the shoulder and saying something with a smile on her face. This Xiao Chen was godly. How long had it been? Just a few words, and Princess Feng Ju's tears had turned into a smile? And looking at Princess Feng Ju's expression, it was obvious that she admired Xiao Chen a lot. I miscalculated. Looks like Brother Xiao is the real veteran in the field of flowers." Long Yang couldn't help but sigh softly. Although Long Yang's words were soft, Tianyu, who was standing beside him, heard every single word. In this regard, Tianyu's face turned cold and asked Long Yang, "Young Master Long Yang, what did you say just now? I didn't hear it clearly, can you say it again?" Obviously, in his excitement, Long Yang forgot that Tianyu was standing beside him. At this time, hearing Tianyu's words, Long Yang smiled embarrassedly. Nothing, nothing. This young master is just saying that Brother Xiao has good methods, really good methods. Long Yang thought that Xiao Chen had settled Princess Fengju, but at this time, Xiao Chen was in a headache. That's right, Xiao Chen did persuade Princess Fengju, but Princess Fengju's next decision made Xiao Chen a little helpless for a moment. Princess Fengju said with a determined face, "Let's do it this way. From now on, I will follow Long Yang. Wherever he goes, I will follow." Xiao Chen was taken aback when he heard Princess Fengju's words. Then, he said helplessly, Princess, I don't think it's the right time yet. Brother Long Yang and I are going to the human domain. Princess, why don't you wait for Brother Long Yang to come back before you, seeking collection, seeking monthly votes, seeking recommendation? Chapter 1245. Initially, Xiao Chen wanted to persuade Princess Fengju to leave first. Who knew that Princess Fengju would want to follow the three of them to the human territory? Hearing this, Xiao Chen was completely helpless. Previously, when Long Yang went to the human territory, Xiao Chen was a little worried about his safety. Now that Fengju was involved, wouldn't it be more troublesome? However, in the face of Xiao Chen's persuasion, Fengju acted like Long Yang and didn't care at all. Waving his hand casually, Fengju said nonchalantly, "Don't worry, there is no place in the central world that I can't go." Even his words were exactly the same. Hearing Fengju's words, Xiao Chen didn't know what to say. Moreover, from the looks of it, it would be difficult to change Fengju's mind. Hinting at Xiao Chen not to worry, Fengju turned around and shouted to the 12 girls from the Huang Yi clan. "All of you can go back. You don't have to follow me." These 12 girls were also from the Huang Yi clan and could be considered as Fengju's personal guards. They had always been responsible for Fengju's safety. Hearing that Fengju wanted all of them to leave, one of the girls said reluctantly, "Princess, she wanted to persuade Fengju to let them follow, but before she could finish her sentence, Fengju waved his hand and said, 'It's fine, you don't have to worry about my safety. Besides, it will be inconvenient for all of you to follow me to the human territory. Go back.'" Fengju insisted. Seeing this, the 12 girls couldn't say anything more. They immediately bowed to Fengju and left quickly. Not far away, seeing that the 12 girls left and only Fengju stayed behind, Long Yang's eyes flashed with a trace of doubt. What was the meaning of this? Everyone left, but only Fengju stayed behind? But before Long Yang could ask, Xiao Chen had already brought Fengju to him. Looking at Long Yang, Xiao Chen revealed a somewhat helpless smile. "That, Brother Long Yang, Princess Fengju also intends to go to the human territory with us." "What?" Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Long Yang was stunned. Then, he said in disbelief. However, before Xiao Chen could reply, Fengju had already come to Long Yang's side. Without any explanation, Fengju hooked Long Yang's arm and said with a sweet smile, "Brother Long Yang, don't worry, I won't force you anymore. I will stay by your side. When you want to marry me one day, it won't be too late for us to get married." "What?" Hearing Fengju's words, Long Yang was stunned on the spot. What was going on? Was this the result of asking Xiao Chen to persuade Fengju? Although Fengju was no longer forcing him, was he going to rely on him? Did he kill someone with a soft knife? From Fengju's words, it was not hard to tell that from today onwards, Fengju would definitely stay by Long Yang's side. Regarding this, Long Yang looked at Xiao Chen with a puzzled expression. The meaning in his eyes was very obvious. "What did you say to her?" Facing Long Yang's gaze, Xiao Chen spread his hands helplessly and made an "I can't do anything about it" expression. There was no room for Long Yang to refuse at all. Princess Fengju insisted on staying. After that, the four of them found an inn in Lu City to stay. They still planned to leave for the human territory tomorrow morning. At night, the four of them casually chatted and drank in the inn. However, looking at Long Yang's appearance, He was like a little wife who had been bullied. On the other hand, Feng Ju and Tian Yu quickly became familiar with each other after a short period of contact. Making friends between women was completely different from making friends with men. If men wanted to get familiar with each other, they would have to experience a lot of things in the end. However, it was different for women. Once they met, they would become friends with each other in the blink of an eye without even exchanging a few words. Looking at Tian Yu and Feng Ju, who were whispering not far away, Xiao Chen and Long Yang sighed helplessly. They raised their cups and drank. Then, Xiao Chen asked Long Yang, "Brother Long Yang, tell me about the saint ranking." Xiao Chen was indeed very curious about the saint ranking. Hearing this, although Long Yang was depressed, he did not refuse. After all, he had nothing to do now. Long Yang poured himself and Xiao Chen a cup of wine and said slowly, "The saint ranking is actually not complicated. To put it simply, the saint ranking of the central world can be said to be a method by the will of the heavenly way to protect the younger generation." As the third holy son on the saint ranking, Long Yang's understanding of the saint ranking obviously surpassed Xiao Chen's elder brother, Chun Ling. With Long Yang's explanation, Xiao Chen quickly gained a more detailed understanding of the saint ranking. He already knew that the saint ranking was set up by the will of the heavenly way. Currently, there were a total of 108 people on the saint ranking. Whenever there was a change in the saint ranking would appear in the sky above the central world. No matter where one was, one could see the saint ranking. There were a total of 108 names on the saint ranking. As long as one was on the saint ranking, it represented an honor. At the same time, it was also a form of protection from the will of the heavenly way. According to Long Yang, unless the holy sons and holy daughters on the saint ranking were killed in battle or by others of the same generation, no one was allowed to kill the holy sons and holy daughters on the saint ranking. This included the great sage. To put it simply, if one was much older than a holy son on the saint ranking and had a higher seniority than a holy son on the saint ranking, one could not attack the holy sons and holy daughters on the saint ranking. Otherwise, one would be punished by the will of the heavenly way. Such a punishment was extremely severe. Previously, the great sage did not believe in heresy and killed a holy son on the saint ranking. That holy son was only ranked 105th on the saint ranking. However, even so, the great sage was still killed by the will of the heavenly way. It could be said that the holy sons on the saint ranking were a group of people protected by the will of the heavenly way. This was also the reason why Long Yang and Feng Ju did not mind going to the human domain at all. Naturally, Long Yang and Feng Ju were not afraid of people of the same generation. This was because there were very few people in the same generation who could match the two of them, let alone have the ability to kill them. Unless several holy sons in the top 10 on the saint ranking attacked together, it would be possible to pose a threat to the two of them. Of course, the will of the heavenly way's protection for the holy sons on the saint ranking was only one of the reasons. There were many more things that even Long Yang did not understand. For example, it was said that every generation of holy sons on the saint ranking would eventually go to a mysterious place. In this mysterious place, the holy sons on the saint ranking would die on a large scale. However, those who were able to come out alive in the end would all become the great sage without exception. There were even rumors that some had broken through the great sage realm and mysteriously disappeared. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1246. After learning more about the holy ranking from Long Yang, Xiao Chen felt a sense of yearning towards the chosen on the holy ranking. Putting everything else aside, just the fact that he was protected by the will of the heavenly Tao was already heaven-defying enough. The chosen on the holy ranking could only fight against people of the same generation. Experts of the older generation could not fight against the chosen on the holy ranking. Moreover, this was the rule of the will of the heavenly way. There was no need to think about hiding anything from the will of the heavenly way. Unlike living beings, did the will of the heavenly way have a life? It did not seem to have a physical existence. However, such a mysterious existence controlled everything in this world. Or rather, it coexisted with this world. Therefore, in this world, there was no need to think about hiding anything from the will of the heavenly way. It was also because of this that no one dared to violate the rules of the holy ranking. After all, the great sage had used his life to prove this point. The will of the heavenly way and this world coexisted. Neither of them could leave the other. If the will of the heavenly way disappeared, this world would not be far from destruction. At the very least, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth would quickly dry up and no one would be able to set foot on the martial way. After learning the answer from Long Yang, Xiao Chen was no longer worried about Long Yang and Feng Ju going to the human race's territory. After all, with the rules of the holy ranking, the experts of the older generation of the human race would not dare to make a move. As for the younger generation, no one in the human race was a match for Long Yang. After chatting casually in the inn for a while, the four of them returned to their rooms one after another. Xiao Chen naturally shared a room with Tianyu. Long Yang originally intended to have a room for himself, but Feng Ju refused to comply. In the end, Long Yang and Feng Ju also booked a room. After Xiao Chen's persuasion, Feng Ju seemed to have thought it through. He treated Long Yang with extreme gentleness. However, Long Yang couldn't adapt to such gentleness. It was simply torture for him. However, Feng Ju's method was perfect. At least Long Yang didn't have any way to break it. He couldn't just beat Feng Ju away. They did not bother about Long Yang and Feng Ju. After a night of cultivation, the four of them woke up early the next morning. After washing up, they left Delight City and headed for the human race's territory. Because Delight City was already at the border of the human territory and there was no teleportation formation that led to the human territory, Xiao Chen's group of four could only rely on flying to travel. However, the four of them were not in a hurry. They would be able to reach the human territory in less than a day. Along the way, they didn't rest much. In the afternoon, Xiao Chen's group of four arrived at a wide river. According to Long Yang, this river was the dividing line between the beast race and the human territory. It was called the Heavenly Chen River. The Heavenly Chen River cut across the entire border between the human and beast races. The human and beast races' territories were also divided by the Heavenly Chen River. The southern bank was the beast ancestors' territory, while the northern bank was the human territory. On the Heavenly Chen River, there were many experts from both races guarding it. They formed many strongholds, and when these strongholds were connected together, they formed a solid line of defense. It could be said that both the human and beast races had set up a heavy defense on both sides of the Heavenly Chen River. The three main races of the beast race and the human race had sent many experts to guard the area. Of course, compared to the human and ghost races' territories, the two sides of the Heavenly Chen River were relatively peaceful. After all, the relationship between the human and beast races was not as tense as the ghost race. The border between the ghost race and the human race had gathered many of the top battle prowess from both races. The defensive force there was at least 5 times that of the Heavenly Chen River. The human race and ghost race could go to war at any time, especially now that the War of the 100 Races was approaching. As a result, the relationship between the two races became even more tense. As for the beast race and the human race, they were mostly on guard. As a result, the Heavenly Chen River was relatively peaceful. They came to a crossing on the Heavenly Chen River. There were many such crossings on the Heavenly Chen River, and they were there for the convenience of travel between the two races. Of course, passing through the crossings was not something that could be agreed upon. This was because regardless of whether one was from the human race to the beast race or vice versa, they had to go through the checks of both races. Only after going through the checks could they successfully enter one of the territories. Xiao Chun and the other three naturally had to go through the checks of the beast race. However, due to the presence of Long Yang and Feng Ju, the experts of the beast race did not dare to make things difficult for them and directly chose to let them pass. On the entire Heavenly Qin River, almost 80% of the places were set up with forbidden flight formations. Therefore, if one wanted to rely on strength to cross the Heavenly Qin River, one would either have to find those extremely dangerous places, but the danger was too high, or have the strength of the quasi-saint realm and forcefully break through the forbidden flight formations to cross. However, these two methods were not the best choice. The best choice was naturally to find a crossing. Every few hundred miles there would be a ferry. However, the only problem with crossing the river through the ferry was that they would have to be interrogated by the two clans. Speaking of the Heavenly Qin River's crossings, it was actually very simple. There were no boats or bridges. To put it bluntly, it was an area between flight-prohibiting formations. Hence, it was called a crossing. As there were no flight-prohibiting formations here, cultivators could naturally fly across without any worries. However, there were strongholds of the two races on both sides of the river. One was for defense, and the other was for checking those who crossed the river. After successfully passing through the checks of the beast race, the expert of the beast race in charge of this stronghold personally escorted the group to the riverside after learning of Long Yang and Feng Ju's identity. The expert of the beast race reminded Long Yang and Feng Ju with a fawning smile on his face as he looked at them. Young Master Long Yang, Princess Feng Ju, the defenses on the other side of the river have just changed 2 days ago. It is said that the person in charge of this stronghold is an elder of the Heavenly Yin Sun sect. This person doesn't seem to have a good impression of the beast race. Young Master and Princess should be more careful. The expert of the beast race took the initiative to remind them. Hearing this, Long Yang smiled slightly and said, "It's fine. Brother Xiaoqin will take care of the human race. Isn't that right, Brother Xiaoqin? It's your territory now. You have to protect us." Long Yang was clearly joking. However, hearing this, Xiaoqin still rolled his eyes and said in annoyance, "Forget it. I can't even protect myself when crossing the river. You know that I'm not from the Central World. I don't have an illustrious identity like yours. So if you want me to protect you, forget it. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 1247. Unlike Long Yang and Feng Ju, Xiaoqin wasn't born and raised in the Central World. He didn't have any roots in the Central World, let alone any backing. Moreover, although the Sacred Palace was undoubtedly one of the strongest forces in the North Star world, a quasi-saint sect like the Sacred Palace didn't have any right to speak in the Central World. It was the Supreme Saint sects that truly dominated the Central World. Therefore, Xiaoqin could be said to be an ordinary person with no background in the Central World. However, Long Yang didn't seem to mind Xiaoqin's words at all. He smiled and said, "Brother Xiaoqin, don't belittle yourself. With your talent, you'll soon be able to gain a foothold in the Central World." Haha. Long Yang didn't really need Xiaoqin to do anything. After all, he knew that Xiaoqin hadn't really adapted to the Central World yet. Moreover, this was Xiaoqin's first time in the human territory. The four of them rose into the air and flew across the Heavenly Qin River along the ferry route. Soon, the four of them arrived on the other side of the Heavenly Qin River, where the human territory was. There was also a stronghold here, but it belonged to the human race. However, the four of them were surrounded by several human race experts as soon as they landed. The leading saint expert looked at the four of them and said after sizing them up, "A human race, a heavenly race, and 2 beast race experts? What do you want to do in the human territory?" Xiaoqin and the other 3 didn't try to hide their identities. so the saint expert could see through them. Long Yang took the initiative to answer the question. "Can't we come to the human territory for a stroll?" Long Yang slowly extended his right hand as he spoke, and an ethereal token floated above his palm. The token didn't have a physical body, but one could see a heavenly lightning pattern on it and the number 3 on the back. The saint was stunned when he saw the token. Then, he asked in a deep voice, "You are Long Yang?" He had recognized Long Yang's identity with just a token. The token that Long Yang had displayed earlier was actually a token unique to the chosen on the saint rankings. The 108 holy sons and holy daughters on the holy rankings all had such a token. Once one stepped onto the holy rankings, the heavenly way would bestow a token. As long as one's will moved, the token would appear out of thin air. Furthermore, the holy rankings token could not be duplicated, nor could it be manufactured, because the token did not have a physical body. There was no need to doubt the authenticity of the token of a chosen on the saint rankings because it couldn't be fake. Long Yang nodded faintly in response to the saint's question. Yes. Long Yang took out his token, and Feng Ju did the same. Feng Ju took out her token, which was exactly the same as Long Yang's. However, Feng Ju's token had the number 6, which meant that she was ranked 6th on the saint ranking. 2 chosen on the holy rankings, and both of them were ranked in the top 10. After seeing Long Yang and Feng Ju's tokens, the saint didn't say anything else. Clearly, he planned to let them pass. Due to the existence of the heavenly way and the uniqueness of the holy rankings, there was an unwritten rule among the 100 clans of the Central World that the entry of chosen on the holy rankings could not be stopped. Naturally, the human race also abided by this rule. When he saw the saint immediately choose to let them pass, he shifted his attention to Xiao Chen and Tian Yu. At this moment, Xiao Chen coveted the chosen on the holy rankings even more. It really wasn't bad to have such an identity. Not only could he obtain the protection of the heavenly way, but he could also come and go as he pleased in the Central World. Moreover, he didn't have to worry about his identity being exposed at all. However, it was still slightly difficult for Xiao Chen to ascend the hallowed rankings with his current strength. According to Long Yang, even the person at the bottom of the 108 people on the hallowed rankings possessed a cultivation at the perfection of the Tao Emperor realm, and their combat strength was extraordinary as well. If Xiao Chen wanted to ascend the holy rankings, his cultivation would have to break through to the perfection of the Tao Emperor stage at the very least. After all, it was basically impossible to surmount a realm of cultivation to defeat an enemy. The matter of the holy rankings wasn't urgent for now. At this moment, Xiao Chen's expression didn't change much when he faced the saint's gaze. "The 2 of us are disciples of the sacred palace. We were besieged by the Ghost Emperor sect, so," Xiao Chen gave a simple explanation of what happened. However, the saint was stunned when he heard his name, and then he interrupted Xiao Chen with an excited expression. "You're Xiao Chen? The number 1 holy son of the sacred palace? Senior, you know me?" Xiao Chen was puzzled when he heard this and saw the excited expression on the saint's face. He definitely didn't know this saint. Of course, Xiao Chen hadn't expected the saint to be so excited when he heard his name. It was as if the saint had been searching for him for a long time. Actually, Xiao Chen's guess wasn't wrong. This saint was a deacon of the Heavenly Yang sect, and the Heavenly Yang sect had indeed been searching for Xiao Chen for a long time. Even their outpost had received an order from the Heavenly Yang sect to search for Xiao Chen's whereabouts with all their strength. Moreover, the most puzzling thing was that this order had actually been issued by Enyangzi himself. How could someone who could make the great sage Enyangzi give the order to search for Be Simple? So, this saint had instantly become excited when he heard Xiao Chen's name. He'd been searching for Xiao Chen's whereabouts all this time, but unfortunately, he'd been unable to find anything. Yet now, Xiao Chen had actually taken the initiative to appear before him, so how could he not be excited? Seeing that Xiao Chun had acknowledged his identity, the saint's attitude immediately underwent a 180-degree change, and he became very polite. He, little friend Xiao Chun, you may not know this, but the sacred palace has already become a subsidiary sect of the Heavenly Yang sect, so we've also received orders to search for your whereabouts. The saint didn't know why Yinyangzi was trying so hard to search for Xiao Chen's whereabouts. After all, his status was still too low. However, the quasi-saint supreme sovereign in charge of the outpost definitely knew something. Therefore, the saint invited Xiao Chun and the others into the outpost and then ordered someone to report this to the quasi-saint supreme sovereign. This stronghold was a small city. The city walls weren't high and there weren't many houses. There was a courtyard in the center, and this was the residence of the quasi-sage great sovereign who was in charge of this stronghold. After being invited into the courtyard's front hall, Xiao Chun and the others took their seat. However, Xiao Chun still felt a little strange. What was the Heavenly Yang sect doing? Especially that saint. Was there a need to be so polite to him? Xiao Chun naturally couldn't imagine that he was now a famous person in the Heavenly Yang sect. After all, there weren't many people who could make Yinyangzi pay so much attention to him. Unfortunately, he'd only heard of his name and never seen him in person. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1248. Sitting in the front hall, Xiao Chun naturally didn't know that he was already famous in the Taiyang sect. However, such a reputation had actually brought Xiao Chun some trouble. There were only two reasons for this. First, Yinyangzi valued Xiao Chun greatly. Just think about it, Yinyangzi was the great sage. In the entire human territory, how many people of the younger generation of the human race would want to be looked at by Yinyangzi, let alone the Taiyang sect and the Tianyin sect? However, Yinyangzi had never paid much attention to the younger generation of the human race. This time, however, the importance Yinyangzi showed to Xiao Chun shocked everyone. However, in addition to the shock, it was inevitable that jealousy would spread wildly. Many people wanted to see who exactly Xiao Chun was and whether he had 3 heads and 6 arms to make Yinyangzi value him so highly. This was the first reason. The second reason was because of Chun Ling, Long Qing, Chun Yu, and the other chosen of the sacred palace, as well as Qin Shuru, Gu Lingyao, and Fairy of 100 Flowers. Now, everyone had entered the Taiyang sect to cultivate, including Xiao Xing and the other patriarchs and the sacred palace saint venerables. They had all become guest elders or deacons of the Taiyang sect. As a quasi-sage sect from the North Star boundary, the sacred palace had no foundation in the central world, but so many geniuses had emerged. Moreover, Chun Ling and the other chosen received extremely high treatment as soon as they entered the sacred palace. In particular, Chun Ling, Long Qing, and Chun Yu were directly appointed as the prospective chosen of the Taiyang sect by Yinyangzi. What would the senior disciples think? It would be difficult not to be jealous, right? Because of the above 2 reasons, the people of the sacred palace didn't get along well with the other factions of the Taiyang sect. To put it bluntly, the sacred palace was an outsider. He didn't have any foundation. In addition, Qin Shuru and the other 2 women were also very hated in the Heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. In just a few days after entering the Heavenly Yin Taiyang sect, the 3 women had already received many pursuers from the Heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. Even the Holy Son of the Heavenly Yin Taiyang sect had joined in. Fortunately, Yinyangzi had spoken first, and also had the intention to take care of the sacred palace people, so these people restrained themselves a lot. Although they did not dare to do anything out of line on the surface, it was hard to say what would happen behind their back. All in all, Xiao Chun was valued by Yinyangzi. The sacred palace could become a subsidiary sect of the Heavenly Yin Taiyang sect, and Chun Ling, Long Qing, and the others could enter the Heavenly Yin Taiyang sect to cultivate. It could be said that the advantages outweighed the disadvantages. Moreover, such things were unavoidable. If the sacred palace wanted to gain a firm foothold in the central world, these were things they had to go through. Of course, Xiao Qin was unaware of all this. He was sitting in the front hall and drinking tea while waiting. Long Yang couldn't help but tease him. "Brother Xiao Qin, you said before that you can't even protect yourself. Why do I feel like you have a very high status in the human race?" When that saint heard your name just now, he immediately acted like he had seen his father. "Haha, if you say you won't take care of us, then you're not a good brother," Long Yang teased. In fact, Xiao Qin was also very puzzled about this matter, and had no idea what was going on. Therefore, when he heard Long Yang's words, Xiao Qin rolled his eyes at him, and couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with him. He directly rolled his eyes at Long Yang. To be honest, when Xiao Qin and Long Yang were together, there was no respect and there was no flattery. Even though Xiao Qin already knew that Long Yang was a holy son on the saint rankings, Xiao Qin's attitude towards him still didn't change. Perhaps Xiao Qin's personality had always been like this. He didn't have the habit of following behind others and flattering them. If others saw Xiao Qin's attitude towards Long Yang, many of them would probably be speechless. After all, Long Yang was the third holy son on the saint rankings and ranked in the top 3. In the entire Central World's younger generation, there were probably less than 5 people besides Xiao Qin who dared to speak to Long Yang without restraint. Of course, Xiao Qin still didn't know that Long Yang was the third holy son on the saint rankings because Long Yang hadn't mentioned it. However, even if he knew, Xiao Qin probably wouldn't think too much about it. So what if he was third? Xiao Qin wouldn't be envious or flatter Long Yang because he firmly believed that he would definitely catch up to Long Yang. Perhaps it was because Xiao Qin's attitude towards him was different that Long Yang felt a sense of sincerity. Therefore, Long Yang felt very comfortable when interacting with Xiao Qin. At this time, the two of them didn't know that their relationship was becoming more and more harmonious under this kind of subtle influence. Princess Fengju had also slowly integrated into the 4 of them in just 1 or 2 days and enjoyed this kind of relationship very much. The 4 of them were very relaxed and sincere together. No one needed to flatter the other and they could say whatever they wanted to say. It was indeed very relaxing. They chatted casually in the front hall. About 10 minutes later, an old man appeared in the hall. Needless to say, this old man was naturally the person in charge of this stronghold, an elder from the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect and a quasi-saint supreme sovereign. Xiao Qin didn't know the old man's name, so he didn't know how to address him. He could only cup his hands and salute. Junior Xiao Qin greets Senior. Hearing Xiao Qin's words, the old man smiled very kindly and said, "Haha, this old man is called Hua Feng. You are Xiao Qin, the first chosen of the sacred palace?" The old man's name was Hua Feng, and he was an elder of the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. Coincidentally, Hua Feng was present at the sacred palace's talent test, so he could be said to have personally witnessed how many abnormal monsters were hidden in the sacred palace. It had been almost a month since the talent assessment. However, Hua Feng's memory was still fresh in his mind, especially towards Chun Ling, Long Qing and Qin Yu. It was also because of this shock that Hua Feng was also very curious about Xiao Qin. Therefore, after receiving the news, he personally showed up to meet him. Otherwise, with Hua Feng's status, even if he had news of Xiao Qin, there was no need for him to show up in person. He only needed his subordinates to send Xiao Qin back to the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. As he spoke, Hua Feng sized up Xiao Qin with great interest. His first impression was very good. Although Xiao Qin's cultivation was only at the perfection of the Tao Emperor realm, his temperament wasn't inferior to the heavenly Yin Taiyang sects chosen at all. Hua Feng nodded slightly to show his satisfaction, and then he turned to look at Long Yang and Fengju with a smile on his face. Long Yang, Fengju, the 2 great chosen of the beast race, Why are you interested in coming to my human race? Haha, Senior Huafeng, we came with Brother Xiaochen. Senior, you won't turn us away, right? Long Yang chuckled when he heard Huafeng's words. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1249. Not only was Long Yang not nervous in front of Huafeng, he even had a cheeky smile on his face. Beside him, Feng Ju didn't even speak. Long Yang and Feng Ju weren't just chosen and chosen ranked in the top 10 of the saint ranking. Their identities were also extraordinary. Therefore, even though Huafeng was a quasi-saint supreme sovereign, Long Yang and Feng Ju still didn't feel nervous in front of him. Huafeng clearly didn't care about Long Yang's attitude and smiled faintly. Of course not. Huafeng naturally wouldn't stop the two saints from entering the human territory. After saying that, Huafeng turned his gaze to Tian Yu and nodded with a smile as a form of greeting. Everyone then took their seats with Huafeng sitting in the main seat. After some conversation, Xiaochen learned about the current situation of the sacred palace from Huafeng. At the same time, he also learned that Chunling, Long Qing, and Qin Shuru were all cultivating in the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. Xiaochen secretly breathed a sigh of relief. It was good that everyone in the sacred palace was safe and sound. As for the rest, he wasn't in a hurry. During the conversation, Huafeng couldn't help but secretly praise Xiaochen's temperament. In the end, Huafeng asked Xiaochen when he planned to go to the sacred palace. In this regard, Xiaochen naturally didn't want to waste any time and said that he was prepared to leave today. Huafeng had no intention of stopping Xiaochen. He immediately gave Xiaochen a token of the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. With this token, Xiaochen could save a lot of trouble in the human territory. Moreover, he could occasionally use the various teleportation arrays in the human territory unconditionally. This made traveling much more convenient. Xiaochen accepted the token and cupped his hands to express his gratitude. Then, without further delay, the four of them left the stronghold and headed for the hinterland of the human territory. With the tokens of the sky, Yin and Sun sect, no one dared to provoke them. However, because Long Yang and Feng Ju were beasts, there were still some ignorant people who came to cause trouble in every city. After all, the appearance of the beast race in the human territory was the same as the appearance of the human race in the beast race's territory. However, Long Yang and Feng Ju didn't care about this at all. Even when facing some saints and quasi-saints, the two of them were indifferent. It made sense. With their identities as chosen on the hallowed rankings, the older generation cultivators wouldn't dare do anything to them. The journey was relatively peaceful, and Xiaochen's group arrived at the sacred palace 7 days later. The holy palace wasn't too far away from the heavenly Yin-Yang sect. It was a good place to establish a sect. Compared to before, the sacred palace hadn't changed much. The main peak in the center was still guarded by 10 saint peaks. A total of 11 peaks formed the entire layout of the sacred palace. Of course, the 10 great sacred halls were also preserved. They didn't hide their whereabouts and flew towards the dustless sacred hall. However, when the four approached the dustless sacred hall, a dozen sacred palace experts suddenly appeared in front of them. The leader was a sacred venerate. He didn't see Xiaochen's identity at first, so he shouted coldly, "Who are you?" Xiao Xing and the others naturally couldn't let their guard down. Therefore, Xiaochen's group was discovered as soon as they approached. Faced with this Saint Lord's question, Xiaochen leaped into the air and came before this Saint Lord. When this Saint Lord saw Xiaochen's face clearly, he was stunned for a moment before exclaiming with a face full of joy, "Xiaochen!" He didn't expect the person to be Xiaochen. Everyone in the sacred palace was extremely nervous about Xiaochen's disappearance. After all, Xiaochen meant a lot to the sacred palace. He was the first chosen and could be said to be the idol of all sacred palace disciples. Now that Xiaochen had returned safely, Xiao Chen smiled and cupped his hands in greeting. Then, the sacred venerate glanced at Long Yang and Feng Ju beside Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen smiled and said, "They are my friends. It was all thanks to their help that I was able to avert danger." After briefly introducing Long Yang and Feng Ju, a strange look flashed across the sacred venerate's eyes when he heard that the two were chosen on the sacred ranking. However, it only lasted for a moment. A chosen on the sacred ranking was one of the top figures of the younger generation in the Central World. This was the first time the sacred venerate had seen one, but now wasn't the time to dwell on it. He immediately smiled and said, "Chosen Xiao Chen has returned safely. I'm sure the patriarchs will be very happy if they know. However, the patriarchs aren't in the sacred palace right now. They have all gone to the heavenly Yin solar sect to cultivate." While personally welcoming Xiao Chen into the sacred palace, the sacred venerate also told Xiao Chen about the situation in the sacred palace. He learned that Xiao Xing's group of 4, the chosen, Guduwiao, Ouyang Roshua, and Qin Shuru were all cultivating in the heavenly Yin solar sect. Xiao Chen didn't say much after learning this. He immediately headed to the Wuchen Sacred Hall and ordered people to prepare accommodations for Long Yang and Feng Ju. Xiao Chen smiled apologetically. "Brother Long Yang, Princess Feng Ju, the two of you can take a stroll around the Wuchen Sacred Hall. I want to see my parents. I'm sure they're worried about us after not hearing from us for so long." Since he had returned safely, he naturally wanted to see his parents. Long Yang waved his hand with a smile when he heard Xiao Chen's words. "Brother Xiao Chen, go ahead. Feng Ju and I will also take a stroll around." After indicating Xiao Chen to do as he pleased, Xiao Chen called over a half-saint elder of the Wuchen Sacred Hall and asked him to take care of Long Yang and Feng Ju. As long as it was their request, the elder would try his best to satisfy it. After settling Long Yang and Feng Ju, Xiao Chen took Tianyu to the courtyard where Bai Ruye and Xiao Qing lived. Just as Xiao Chen thought, the two elders were indeed very worried because of his disappearance this time. It could be said that they didn't have any appetite. Under such worries, the two elders' mental state was a lot worse. But today, when they heard that Xiao Chen had returned safely, the two elders were naturally very excited. They originally wanted to see Xiao Chen in person, but Xiao Chen had already brought Tianyu to the two elders' residence. Seeing that Xiao Chen appeared in front of him safe and sound, Xiao Qing only secretly breathed a sigh of relief, but he did not show it on his face. However, Bai Ruye was different. As a woman, the first time she saw Xiao Chen, Bai Ruye's eyes were already red. She hugged Xiao Chen and said excitedly, "Thank you for your help. Chen, it's good that you're fine. Do you know that mother was worried to death about you?" Bai Ruye's worry was naturally not fake. Hearing this, Xiao Chen also said softly, "Mother, I'm back. Don't worry, your child is fine." Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1250. After Xiao Chen had returned safely, Bai Ruye's heart that had been hanging in the air was finally at ease. However, the incident this time had indeed caused Bai Ruye to feel a lingering fear. She disregarded Xiao Chen's objection and held Xiao Chen's hand as she started to repeatedly warn him. "Chen, you can't do such a dangerous thing in the future. What would your father and I do if something were to happen to you?" Even though Xiao Chen felt helpless in his heart when facing his mother's nagging, he could only nod incessantly and promise that he wouldn't do such a dangerous thing in the future. Actually, what do you think Xiao Chen could do about the incident this time? The Ghost Emperor Sex Exalt Gui Shuang, was already in such a state. Could Xiao Chen, who was merely at the Perfection Tao Emperor realm, go against the great sage? It could be said that the incident this time was completely unavoidable. However, Xiao Chen obviously wouldn't say this to Bai Ruye. When he saw his mother's worried expression, Xiao Chen could only speak some words of comfort and ceaselessly console Bai Ryue. At the same time, Tian Yu was supporting Xiao Chen from the side. Under their consolation, Bai Ryue's mood slowly improved. After her mood improved, Bai Ryue started to pull Tian Yu to talk about the private matters between women. On the other hand, Xiao Chen had a rare moment of peace and quiet. He and his father, Xiao Qing, sat down in the pavilion in the courtyard, and the father and son drank wine as they chatted. Actually, Xiao Qing's worry wasn't any less than Bai Ryue's when Xiao Chen went missing and his fate was unknown. However, he was a man, so it was naturally impossible for him to express his feelings like a woman. So, even though Xiao Qing was worried in his heart and was indeed delighted when he saw Xiao Chen, Xiao Qing didn't say anything from the beginning until the end. "It's good that you're back." While the father and son were drinking wine in the pavilion, Xiao Qing spoke at this moment. "Bing Ning and the others have already gone to the heavenly yin-yang sect." "I know." Hearing Xiao Qing's words, Xiao Chen replied indifferently. When he was with Xiao Qing, the father and son spoke very casually and simply. "Yes, but the three of them are in the yin and yang sect. Although Chun Ling and Long Qing are taking care of them, they still can't compare to you. Since you're back, when do you plan to go to the yin and yang sect?" Xiao Qing asked. "Let's rest for a few days. I want to spend more time with you and mother," Xiao Chen replied. He definitely had to go to the heavenly yin and tai-yang sects, but he wasn't in a hurry. Xiao Chen planned to rest in the Saint Palace for a few days. At the same time, he could spend some time with the two elders before heading to the heavenly yin and tai-yang sects. Speaking of which, Xiao Chen didn't know if the two elders could adapt to the central world. Moreover, he probably wouldn't have much time with them in the future, so Xiao Chen wasn't in a hurry to go to the heavenly yin and tai-yang sects. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Xiao Qing nodded slightly. "Think about it yourself. Now that you've grown up, your mother and I can no longer make decisions for you. Father also knows that you can't always be by our side, so you don't have to worry about us. With old He and old Bai here, you don't have to worry about our safety." The old He and old Bai Xiao Qing spoke of were Elder Master Bai, who had been by Xiao Chen's side in the Tianhe continent. The two of them had now become Xiao Qing and Bai Ryue's old housekeepers and were responsible for their safety. After so many years, Elder Master Bai had also become a Saint Realm expert. Of course, it was thanks to Xiao Chen's help. They had successfully stepped into the Saint Realm with Xiao Chen's help, so the two elders were dead set on Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen was also very assured that they would protect his parent. Hearing Xiao Qing's words, Xiao Chen nodded slightly and said, "Father is right, but don't worry. I'll pay attention to my safety in the future. I'll come back to accompany you more often when I have time." "It's good that you're considerate." Xiao Qing nodded with a smile in response. Xiao Qing saw things far more clearly than Bai Ryue. As Xiao Qing, he knew very well that his son was a dragon among men, and as parents, he and Bai Ryue couldn't do much. Moreover, the two of them weren't very talented, so in Xiao Qing's opinion, he only had two wishes in this life. One was that his son would become a dragon, and the other was that his family could live together peacefully. After chatting with Xiao Qing for more than 2 hours, Bai Ryue personally cooked a table full of dishes, and the family sat down to eat together. It was a rare moment of peace. While Xiao Chen was accompanying his parents, in the heavenly Yin Tai-yang sect, not far from the sacred palace, 100 Flower Fairy's residence. After successfully entering the heavenly Yin Tai-yang sect, Qin Shuru and the other two girls had relied on their own talents to become core disciples of the heavenly Yin Tai-yang sect. Their status wasn't inferior to Emperor Qing and the other sacred palace chosens. Core disciples could already have their own cave abode. However, at this moment, in 100 Flower Fairy's cave abode, there was a young man in a white robe sitting in the garden, looking at 100 Flower Fairy in front of him with a gentle smile. 100 Flower, the heavenly Yin Valley will open in half a month. This time, I've specially asked for a spot for you. Take this token, and you can directly enter the heavenly Een Valley. The young man's name was Bai Churan. His name wasn't just famous in the heavenly Een Taiyang sect, but also in the entire human race. This was because Bai Churan was a chosen of the heavenly Een Taiyang sect, a chosen on the saint ranking. He was ranked 93rd on the saint ranking. 93rd might sound low at first glance, and could be considered the bottom of the saint ranking. However, one couldn't forget that the Central World's population was countless, and only 100 people could make it onto the saint ranking. On the saint leaderboard, even those ranked at the bottom were enough to make countless people look up to them and envy them. In the heavenly Een Taiyang sect, there were only 2 chosens on the saint ranking, and Bai Churan was one of them. From this, one could see how high Bai Churan's status was. As for the heavenly Een Valley, it was one of the top cultivation secret realms of the heavenly Een Taiyang sect. It was extremely famous in the entire human race. It was far from the sacred palace's celestial demon mountain or the ghost realm. Countless disciples of the heavenly Een Taiyang sect were shocked by the opening of the heavenly Een Valley. They would do anything to obtain a spot, but Bai Churan was giving a spot to 100 Flower Fairy for free. However, 100 Flower Fairy's expression was indifferent in the face of Bai Churan's goodwill. Her voice was cold as she said, "Senior brother Bai is too polite. I don't dare accept such a generous gift. Please take it back." His expression was still calm, but it gave people a feeling of being 1,000 miles away. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1251. Bai Churan had given such a precious spot to heavenly Een Valley to Bai Hua Fairy just like that. Bai Hua Fairy naturally knew what Bai Churan was thinking because it wasn't the first time Bai Churan had expressed his love for Bai Hua Fairy. However, Bai Hua Fairy didn't accept Bai Churan's love at all and had already rejected him outright. She told Bai Churan that she already had a husband. Pursuing a woman who already had a husband wasn't something to be proud of, but Bai Churan didn't give up. In his opinion, so what if Bai Hua Fairy was already married? Moreover, Bai Hua Fairy's appearance stunned Bai Churan at first glance. Of course, Bai Churan wasn't just infatuated with Bai Hua Fairy. He also coveted Qin Shuru and Gu Lingyao. The 3 women were all devastatingly beautiful, but in comparison, Bai Churan preferred Bai Hua Fairy. She was soft and gentle like water. Therefore, he wanted to pursue Bai Hua Fairy. He planned to pursue Qin Shuru and Gu Lingyao after he won her over. He didn't care about anything else at all. At the same time, Bai Churan also knew that Qin Shuru, Bai Hua Fairy, and Gu Lingyao all had the same husband. He was the so-called first chosen of the sacred palace, Shao Qin. He was currently missing and no one knew if he was alive or dead. Bai Churan had already investigated everything in secret. When she heard 100 Flower Fairy's indifferent yet unapproachable answer, she continued to smile and said, "Junior sister, this is a spot that I asked for with great difficulty. If you don't accept it, won't it be embarrassing for me?" One had to admit that Bai Churan's smile was very contagious and gave off an extremely warm feeling. Unfortunately, the falling flower had feelings for the heartless brook. Bai Hua Fairy snorted disdainfully at Bai Churan's pursuit. Ever since she followed Shao Qin, Bai Hua Fairy no longer cared about any man. Therefore, Bai Hua Fairy smiled indifferently. "Thank you, senior brother, but I really can't accept it. If there's nothing else, senior brother, please leave. I'm going to start cultivating." Bai Churan refused again and directly asked her to leave. Hearing Flower Fairy's words, Bai Churan could no longer keep a straight face. A trace of coldness flashed through her eyes. At the same time, Green Bamboo and Si Ju, who were in charge of serving Flower Fairy, stepped forward and spoke politely to Bai Churan. "Senior brother Bai, please." The three women entered the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect to cultivate. Qin Yao, Qin Luo, Fei Mei, Lan, Lu Zhu, and Si Ju naturally followed them. They were responsible for taking care of the three women. Among them, Lu Zhu and Si Ju were responsible for taking care of Hundred Flower Fairy. Flower Fairy naturally trusted Green Bamboo and Si Ju completely. She didn't care what Bai Churan thought. When Green Bamboo and Si Ju came forward, Flower Fairy was already preparing to leave. However, before Hundred Flower Fairy could get very far, Bai Churan spoke up from behind her. "Junior sister, we don't even know if your husband, Shao Qin, is dead or alive. Do you plan on continuing like this? And I, Bai Churan, am a saint on the saint rankings, one of the two saints of the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. How am I inferior to Shao Qin? How am I not good enough for you?" He had been pursuing Flower Fairy for some time now, but Bai Churan had been rejected time and time again. This was the complete opposite of the past, when Bai Churan only needed to beckon with her finger and those women would throw themselves at her. Bai Churan didn't like this feeling at all. At this moment, Bai Churan finally couldn't suppress the anger in her heart and asked coldly. Hearing Bai Churan's words, Hundred Flower Fairy didn't turn around. Instead, she said indifferently, "If my husband is dead, then Hundred Flower Fairy won't continue living. I'm willing to die with my husband. You don't need to worry about this, senior brother. Moreover, Hundred Flower Fairy believes that my husband will definitely be able to avert danger." Shao Qian's disappearance and unknown fate made many people think that Shao Qian was dead for sure. An outsider from the North Star realm, who wasn't familiar with the Central World and didn't have any background, wanted to live in a foreign territory of the Central World. It was almost impossible. However, Hundred Flower Fairy and the other two women believed in Shao Qian because along the way, Shao Qian had resolved countless dangers and created countless miracles. Since he had created so many miracles, the three women believed that Shao Qian could create another miracle this time. Hearing Hundred Flower Fairy's words, which were full of confidence and love, Bai Churan's anger burned even hotter. At this moment, Bai Churan's eyes were filled with killing intent. "Even if he isn't, I'll kill him myself." At this moment, Bai Churan no longer hid his true intentions. Instead, he directly revealed his murderous intent toward Shao Qian. In Bai Churan's view, the reason why Hundred Flower Fairy had rejected him time and time again and had never been nice to him was all because of Shao Qian. As long as he killed Shao Qian, he could have Hundred Flower Fairy, Qin Shuru, and Gu Lingyao for himself. Come to think of it, Shao Qian was just an outsider, yet he was able to have three beautiful wives. This made Bai Churan extremely envious and jealous at the same time. In his view, an ant like Shao Qian didn't deserve to have peerless fairies like Hundred Flower Fairy and the other two women. Bai Churan didn't hold back at all. Hearing this, Hundred Flower Fairy stopped and turned around. But at this time, Hundred Flower Fairy's face was full of coldness. She stared at Bai Churan. Although she had rejected Bai Churan before, because of his status, Hundred Flower Fairy was still polite. But now Bai Churan said that he wanted to kill Shao Qian. How could Hundred Flower Fairy not be angry? She stared coldly at Bai Churan, but soon Hundred Flower Fairy smiled coldly and said, "You can't kill him. If my husband comes back, the one who dies will be you." Then, without waiting for Bai Churan's reply, Hundred Flower Fairy turned and left. Bai Churan was strong, but so what? In Hundred Flower Fairy's heart, Shao Qian was the strongest person. In this world, no one could stand shoulder to shoulder with Shao Qian. This was Hundred Flower Fairy's confidence in Shao Qian, and also her love for Shao Qian. She believed that Shao Qian could defeat any strong enemy. Her words were full of contempt, and her eyes were full of mockery. Looking at Hundred Flower Fairy's departing figure, Bai Churan recalled what she had said before. Bai Churan felt that his self-esteem had been trampled. A woman dared to look down on him, and it was for another man. Baichuran said fiercely. Xiao Chen, if you really survive, I will kill you. Also, 100 Flower Fairy, since you don't know what's good for you, don't blame me for it. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1252. Baichuran was infuriated by 100 Flower Fairy's disdain. Baichuran said coldly as she watched 100 Flower Fairy's departing figure. Baichuran was about to leave when she inadvertently glanced at Green Bamboo and Si Ju, who were also standing beside her with cold expressions. This was not the first time he had seen Green Bamboo and Si Ju. He had to admit that even though they were just maids, they were equally beautiful. However, because they had always been by 100 Flower Fairy's side, the two of them naturally had a feeling that they were just leaves. At this moment, the furious Baichuran suddenly caught sight of Green Bamboo and Si Ju. Baichuran was slightly taken aback by the beauty of the two women, and then an extremely evil thought quietly rose in her mind. She quietly left 100 Flower Fairy's cave dwelling, then returned to her own cave dwelling. At the same time, she anxiously called over 4 of her trusted disciples. They were all prospective holy sons of the heavenly Yin and Taiyang sect. As a supreme saint sect, the heavenly Yin and Taiyang sect only had 2 holy sons, but they had many prospective holy sons. There were already several hundred of them. Of course, several hundred was only a drop in the ocean compared to the nearly 1 million disciples of the heavenly Yin and Taiyang sect. Moreover, the reason why there was such a huge difference in the number of holy sons and prospective holy sons was because of the saint ranking. This was because no sect in the Central World had the right to confer the title of Holy Son. Moreover, even if you conferred the title, they wouldn't acknowledge it. Only those who could enter the saint ranking and obtain the recognition of the will of the heavenly way could become a publicly recognized holy son or holy daughter in the Central World. Therefore, the number of holy sons and prospective holy sons in the heavenly Yin and Taiyang sect was completely disproportionate. When the 4 candidates arrived at Baichuran's residence, they were all extremely respectful to her. Baichuran, who was seated on the main seat, had a fiery look on her face as she said, "Don't worry. Tonight, the 4 of you will secretly go to Bai Hua Fairy's cave and capture her 2 maids for me. This is the token for Bai Hua Fairy's cave. With this token, you will be able to enter without any problems." After each immortal's cave was distributed to the disciples, there would naturally be defensive measures. However, as long as they held the token, these talisman arrays that were responsible for protecting the immortal's cave would no longer have any effect. Normally, each abode would have 2 tokens. One would be kept by the owner of the abode, while the other would be kept by the Chor Hall of the Yin and Yang sect. With Baichuran's status, it was naturally not difficult for her to obtain the token of Flower Fairy's abode from the Chor Hall. They didn't know why Baichuran wanted to capture Si Ju and Lu Ju, but the 4 candidates didn't hesitate and immediately agreed. They were only capturing 2 women, and they weren't disciples of the heavenly Yin or Taiyang sect. This wasn't a big deal to them. Baichuran smiled coldly as she watched the 4 people leave with the tokens. "Fairy of 100 flowers, I can't touch you, but I can touch your maids. I don't believe that the ancestor will punish me for Wei Wei and her 2 maids." Due to Yinyangzi's secret protection, Baichuran didn't dare to do anything to 100 Flower Fairy openly. However, Si Ju and Lu Ju were different. They didn't have much status in the Yin and Yang sects. In her fury today, Baichuran inadvertently glanced at them and had a wicked thought. She wanted to rape Si Ju and Lu Ju. "Isn't Fairy of 100 flowers cold and arrogant? Isn't your husband Xiao Chen the only one in your heart? Fine, I, Baichuran, can't do anything to you for now. In that case, I'll sleep with your 2 maids and see what you can do." Moreover, although Green Bamboo and Si Ju were not as beautiful as Fairy of 100 flowers, they were still top-notch beauties. Baichuran was more than happy to sleep with such women. Soon night fell. Inside Flower Fairy's cave residence, Flower Fairy was cultivating in the training room. At the same time, Green Bamboo and Seeju were also cultivating. No one noticed that 4 figures had silently entered 100 Flower Fairy's dwelling under the cover of night. Because there were only 100 Flower Fairy, Seeju, and Lu Zhu in the dwelling, no one noticed them along the way. They were none other than the 4 candidates who had come to kidnap Seeju and Lu Zhu under Baichuran's orders. Along the way, it had to be said that the luck of these 4 people was indeed very good. Very quickly, the 4 of them arrived at the courtyard where Green Bamboo and Seeju lived. Caught off guard, Green Bamboo and Sea Chrysanthemum were quickly captured. Then, they were quickly taken out of the cave and safely brought to Baichuran's cave. Within a small courtyard within Baichuran's dwelling. Baichuran strode into the courtyard and glanced at the 4 candidates who were standing respectfully in the courtyard. She revealed a wisp of a smile as she spoke. "That's right. Where is she?" "Candidate, she's in the room, but we've already knocked her out," one of them replied. "No worries. You 4 stay here and don't let anyone in," Baichuran said with a smile and strode into the room. The room was dimly lit by candlelight. Seeju and Lu Zhu were lying unconscious on the bed. Baichuran easily woke them up. When they saw Baichuran in front of them, they were stunned at first, but they quickly spoke with cold expressions. "Senior Bai, what is the meaning of this?" The 2 women's attitudes were very cold. Seeing this, Baichuran directly slapped Green Bamboo's face. At the same time, she said with a cold expression, "How dare 2 mere maids speak to me like that? You're courting death." But soon, Baichuran's lips curled into a smile. "Although the 2 of you are maidservants, your looks are passable. This saint has been pursuing 100 Flower Fairy for a long time, but that B***tch is not moved at all. Fine, since I can't get that B***tch for now, it's not a bad idea for me to sleep with the 2 of you first. I wonder how that B***tch will feel when she finds out that I've slept with the 2 of you, haha." At this point, there was no need for Baichuran to hide anything. Besides, the sight of Seeju and Lu Zhu's alluring bodies made Baichuran's heart burn with passion. A unique impulse of a man swept through his body. Upon hearing Baichuran's words and watching as he approached them step by step, Green Bamboo and Sea Chrysanthemum sulked. They didn't expect this gentle and refined Baichuran to do such a thing. He actually wanted to do such a thing to them. "Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me." Chapter 1253. In truth, Baichuran didn't really like Green Bamboo and Seeju. He was just angry because of 100 Flower Fairy's rejection, which was why he did this to the 2 girls. Seeing Baichuran approaching step by step, the 2 girls' expressions changed drastically, and they cried out, "Our young master won't let you off." "Our young master?" Baichuran's expression darkened when he heard this. It was Xiao Chen again. For some reason, whenever Baichuran heard the name Xiao Chen, his heart would burn with anger. Logically speaking, Baichuran and Xiao Chen had never met before, but Baichuran was filled with killing intent towards Xiao Chen. A cold smile immediately appeared on Baichuran's face. He walked towards the 2 girls with a sneer and said slowly, "Xiao Chen, do you think I care about someone whose life or death is unknown? Even if he's right in front of me, what can he do?" As she spoke, Baichuran casually pointed out 2 fingers. 2 rays of light flashed and entered the 2 women's dantians, sealing their cultivation in an instant. In front of Baichuran, the 2 girls clearly had no power to resist. With their cultivation sealed, they could only watch as Baichuran approached them step by step. Unable to resist, the 2 girls' hearts were filled with terror and deep determination. If Baichuran really got his way this time, the 2 girls definitely couldn't continue living in this world. In fact, from the beginning, Qingyao, Qingluo, Feimei, Anlan, Green Bamboo, and Seeju had feelings for Xiao Chen. However, the 6 girls had always known that they weren't good enough for Xiao Chen. In addition, Xiao Chen had Qin Shuru and the other 3 girls by his side, so the 6 girls knew very well that they were only Xiao Chen's maids. Even so, the 6 girls were already very satisfied. They had no complaints at all to be able to serve Xiao Chen and the 4 madams. However, if Bai Qiran got his way and lost their chastity, Green Bamboo and Si Ju felt that they were no longer qualified to serve Xiao Chen. Bai Qiran's eyes flashed with determination. Sensing the change in the 2 girls' expressions, he immediately laughed. What? You want to commit suicide? Save it. You don't even have the ability to commit suicide in front of me. What a joke. How could Bai Qiran let Green Bamboo and Si Ju commit suicide? He wanted to see what expression Flower Fairy would have when she found out. That bitch. Bai Qiran's heart burned with anger at the thought of Flower Fairy's contempt for him. Without thinking much, Bai Qiran arrived on the bed in a few steps and pounced on the 2 girls like a hungry tiger pouncing on its prey. While Bai Qiran was acting like a beast, Qin Shuru, Flower Fairy, Gu Lingyao, Long Qing, Chun Ling, Chun Yu, and the other chosen of the sacred palace barged into Bai Qiran's cave dwelling. In fact, not long after Green Bamboo and Si Ju were kidnapped, Qin Shuru personally went to find Flower Fairy. Qin Shuru originally planned to tell Flower Fairy about Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen had returned to the sacred palace today. Such important news was naturally reported to Qin Shuru as soon as possible. Qin Shuru was naturally overjoyed when he received the news. He immediately called Gu Lingyao to find Flower Fairy. It was supposed to be a good thing, but who would have thought that after arriving at Flower Fairy's cave dwelling, they would not see Green Bamboo and Si Ju. Instead, they found some traces of a fight in the 2 girls' room. The 2 girls' inexplicable disappearance, and after some questioning, a disciple happened to see the 4 prospective chosen enter Bai Qiran's cave dwelling from afar. After learning this clue, the group naturally came to Bai Qiran's cave dwelling without hesitation. Qin Shuru and the others still did not know why Bai Qiran ordered people to kidnap Green Bamboo and Si Ju, but they were already burning with anxiety and naturally did not care about anything else. They directly barged into Bai Qiran's cave abode. With Chun Ling, Long Qing, and Chen Yu around, the group fought their way in. In the courtyard, they saw the 4 prospective holy sons of the 2 girls. Moreover, as soon as they entered the courtyard, they heard Green Bamboo and Si Ju's angry curses from the room. At the same time, they also heard Bai Qiran's cold laughter. Scream all you want. This is my cave dwelling. What's the use even if you scream yourself hoarse? When they heard this, how could they not know what Bai Qiran wanted? Qin Shuru and the other 2 girls' pretty faces were already icy cold. Chun Ling did not say anything and directly attacked the 4 prospective chosen. These 4 were all Bai Qiran's lackeys. It was obviously impossible to make them move aside, so it was better to just attack. After Chun Ling took the lead, Long Qing, Chen Yu, and the other sacred palace chosen also attacked. Seeing this, the 4 prospective chosen's expression darkened. You're courting death. Immediately, a great battle broke out in the courtyard. Chun Ling and the others had just joined the Taiyang sect. Although Chun Ling, Long Qing, and Chen Yu's talent was not inferior to Bai Qiran's, their current strength was not as strong as Bai Qiran's. At most, they were evenly matched with the 4 prospective chosen in front of them. They were not confident that they could take down the 4 prospective chosen in a short time, so after the battle, Chun Ling said to Qin Shuru and the other 2 girls, "Hurry up and go in to save them." The 4 prospective chosen were already being held back by Chun Ling and the others. When they heard Chun Ling's words, Qin Shuru and the other 2 girls did not hesitate and immediately rushed into the room. Bai Qiran naturally noticed the commotion in the courtyard. Just as Qin Shuru and the other 2 girls were about to rush into the room, Bai Qiran also stood up from the bed and prepared to check the situation outside. At a glance, the three girls saw Green Bamboo and Siju lying on the bed with their cultivation sealed by Baichuran. Their clothes were also torn to shreds. Fortunately, Baichuran had not succeeded yet. Fortunately, everyone had arrived in time. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Seeing Qin Shuru and the other two girls stride into the courtyard with Qin Yao, Qin Luo, Fei Mei, and Enlon behind them, Green Bamboo and Siju called out tearfully, "Madam." Seeing this, one could imagine how Qin Shuru and the other two girls felt. Gu Lingyao even scolded Baichuran angrily, "Baichuran, you're a beast. How could a chosen on the saint ranking do such a thing?" Gu Lingyao scolded angrily. Flower Fairy and Qin Shuru's faces were cold. Qin Yao, Qin Luo, Fei Mei, and Enlon quickly walked to the bed and comforted Green Bamboo and Siju while taking out new clothes from their storage rings to cover the two girls' bodies. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 1254. After helping Green Bamboo and Siju put on their clothes, Qin Yao, Qin Luo, Fei Mei, and Enlon helped Green Bamboo and Siju to stand behind Qin Shuru and the other two girls. However, the two girls were still in shock. Baichuran had no intention of stopping Qin Yao and Qin Luo. She merely stared at Flower Fairy and the other two girls. Baichuran's strange calmness made Flower Fairy feel that something was wrong. What was she trying to do? In terms of strength, the three girls were obviously no match for Baichuran. Even with Chun Ling, Long Qing, Chen Yu, and the others outside the room, they were no match for Baichuran. Even the four prospective saints, Chun Ling, and the others would have a hard time defeating them. At most, they could only fight to a draw. Don't underestimate the prospective saints of the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin. Any prospective saint of the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin had the strength of a saint in the North Star boundary. There was a huge difference in strength between the two sides, and Baichuran's calmness was a little strange. Flower Fairy naturally felt that something was wrong. Sure enough, a crazed look flashed through Baichuran's eyes a moment later. The corners of her mouth curled up into a sneer as she spoke indifferently. However, her tone was incomparably gloomy and cold. "Originally, I only planned to punish these two little maids a little. However, since all of you are here, I can only change my target. I think that the taste of you three great beauties should be much better than that of the two little maid." Lunatic. Baichuran was definitely a lunatic. After failing to rape Green Bamboo and Siju, she changed her target to Flower Fairy and the other two girls. She wanted to rape them. She was definitely crazy. Flower Fairy and the other two girls' expressions changed when they heard Baichuran's words. However, now was not the time to panic. The three girls had always been with Xiao Chun. Although they were not as strong as Xiao Chun, they were definitely not flower vases. Faced with the current situation, the three girls forced themselves to calm down. Flower Fairy said coldly, "Baichuran, don't you dare. Don't forget about Patriarch Yinyangzi." At this point, she could only use Yinyangzi to intimidate Baichuran. However, Baichuran smiled nonchalantly at Baihua Fairy's words. "Ancestor? I don't believe that the ancestor will really kill me if I force myself on you. At most, it will be a symbolic punishment." Tonight, Baichuran was definitely crazy. After failing to force herself on Green Bamboo and Sea Chrysanthemum, she actually changed her target to Fairy of 100 Flowers. Baichuran had been lusting after the three women for a long time, especially the Fairy of 100 Flowers. It could be said that Baichuran dreamed of having her. Unfortunately, the three women were always cold to her and kept her at a distance. Baichuran was usually patient, but she clearly didn't have that patience tonight. In Baichuran's opinion, even though Yinyangzi had taken good care of the Sacred Palace people, so what? Even if she forced herself on Fairy of 100 Flowers, would Yinyangzi really kill her for the sake of righteousness? After all, there were only two chosen in the entire Tianyin Taiyang sect. If she killed Baichuran, the Tianyin Taiyang sect would only have one chosen left. Yangzi obviously wouldn't do such a stupid thing. Bai Qiuran could be so fearless because she had anticipated this. At the same time, Bai Qiuran had thought it through. Given the three women's feelings for Shaoqing, it was obviously impossible to capture their hearts. Since that was the case, she could only use another method. Even if she couldn't win their hearts, the person who could win their hearts was not bad either. With that thought in mind, Bai Qiuran took a step forward and instantly arrived in front of 100 Flower Fairy and the other two girls. With a casual wave of her hand, Qin Yao and Qing Luo were sent flying out of the room. At the same time, the door closed with a bang. After sending Qin Yao and Qing Luo flying with a slap, only 100 Flower Fairy and the other two were left in the room. Bai Qiuran laughed and said, "You 3B** cheese, I gave you face in the past, but you didn't want it. Today I'll tell you that I've never failed to get what I want." Bai Qiuran had already revealed her beastly side. The three women didn't panic or cry like Green Bamboo and Sea Chrysanthemum. Qin Shuru shouted coldly, "Bai Qiuran, you're courting death." With that, Qin Shuru directly attacked. Seeing this, 100 Flower Fairy and Gu Lingyao naturally followed closely behind. The three women didn't choose to surrender, but the result was predictable. Even though they joined forces, they were still easily defeated and restrained by Bai Qiuran. She easily restrained the three women. At the same time, Long Qing's shout came from outside the door. "Bai Qiuran, if you dare to lay a finger on them, I'll definitely kill you." Obviously, Long Qing and the others outside the room also knew what Bai Qiuran wanted to do. However, because the four prospective saints were holding her back, Long Qing and the others couldn't free themselves and could only watch helplessly. Hearing Long Qing's angry shout, Bai Qiuran smiled faintly. "I forgot. There's also Xiao Chen's second sister. She's also a rare beauty. But that's fine. I can't be too greedy. I think the three of you are enough for me to remember tonight." With that, Bai Qiuran prepared to tear off the three women's clothes. At this moment, the three women didn't hesitate at all and immediately prepared to commit suicide. The three women were chaste people. They would rather die than let Bai Qiuran have her way. However, Bai Qiuran had already expected them to commit suicide, so there was no way she would let them have their way. She immediately stopped them. Their suicide attempts didn't succeed. At this moment, Bai Qiuran had already arrived before the three women. She looked down at the three women who had fallen to the ground and had their cultivations sealed. A trace of undisguised lust burned in her eyes. "I really don't know what that Xiao Chen did to be able to meet the three of you. But it doesn't matter. After tonight, the three of you belong to me, Bai Qiuran." With that, Bai Qiuran attacked. Her first target was naturally 100 Flower Fairy. Without saying a word, she grabbed 100 Flower Fairy's long skirt and tore it apart. 100 Flower Fairy's undergarments were immediately exposed to Bai Qiuran. Without the cover of her long skirt, 100 Flower Fairy's seductive body was unobstructed before Bai Qiuran. Faced with such a scene, how could Bai Qiuran, who yearned for 100 Flower Fairy day and night, resist? Without saying a word, Bai Qiuran pounced on 100 Flower Fairy. However, at this moment, the sounds of fighting outside the room stopped. At the same time, a calm figure came from outside the room. "Bai Qiuran, the ancestor has ordered. Please add, please vote, please recommend." Chapter 1255. In the courtyard, Chen Ling's group and the four candidates had stopped fighting. The two sides faced each other, and an old man in gray robes stood proudly in the middle. This old man was none other than the old servant by Yangzi's side. He had a cultivation base of half-step Great Saint realm. The old man's appearance naturally meant that he knew what had happened here. It made sense. Chen Ling's group had openly barged into Bai Qiuran's cave, so it was naturally impossible to hide such a thing. In the room, Bai Qiuran, who was about to succeed, suddenly heard this voice. Accompanying the voice was a faintly discernible aura that locked onto Baichuran. There was no need to ask. Baichuran already knew who it was just from this aura. Her eyes were filled with unwillingness, especially when she saw 100-flower fairy's alluring body. Baichuran was even more unwilling to give up. But there was nothing she could do. If it were anyone else, even a half-step great saint, Baichuran might choose to ignore them and have her fun first. However, Baichuran did not dare to do so before the old man. The reason was very simple. It could be said that the old man represented Yinyangzi in the Taiyang sect. There was no doubt that if Baichuran made any moves now, the old man would definitely stop her immediately. At that time, she would lose face. Baichuran was depressed, but the three girls secretly sighed in relief. Just now, 100-flower fairy had fallen into complete despair. She had even thought about it. If she was really defiled by Baichuran, then she would definitely not be able to live in this world. After all, she did not know how to face Xiao Chen. In that case, she might as well end everything. Fortunately, things did not develop to that point. The old man's appearance allowed the three girls to escape in the end. After standing there for a long while, Baichuran glared fiercely at 100-flower fairy, but she still walked out of the room helplessly. Not long after Baichuran left, Long Qing charged into the room. Long Qing couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief when she saw the scene in the room. Fortunately, the situation hadn't developed to the worst because that bastard Baichuran didn't have any hands. However, Long Qing was immediately enraged. She saw that Flower Fairy was only wearing a thin layer of underwear. Her long skirt had been torn to shreds by Baichuran. This bastard, I must kill him. Immediately, Qin Shuru and Gu Lingyao stood up and took out a new dress for Flower Fairy to wear. After getting dressed, Qin Shuru asked worriedly, "Are you okay?" Hearing Qin Shuru's words, Flower Fairy forced a smile and shook her head. "It's nothing." This was obviously 100-flower fairy's excuse. After experiencing such a thing, which woman would be fine? Especially someone like Flower Fairy, who was soft on the outside but strong on the inside. Although Baichuran didn't succeed today, he did see her body. Flower Fairy naturally couldn't pretend that nothing happened. Moreover, besides feeling sad, Flower Fairy didn't know how to face Xiao Chen. Although this matter had nothing to do with Flower Fairy and she wasn't responsible for it, Flower Fairy was a woman who valued her chastity very much. As if reading Flower Fairy's mind, Gu Lingyao held Flower Fairy's arm and comforted her gently. "Sister, don't worry. Your husband will avenge you. Besides, this matter wasn't your fault. Your husband won't think too much about it." Xiao Chen naturally wouldn't think too much about it. Before long, Qin Shuru and the other two girls walked out of the room accompanied by Long Qing. At this moment, in the courtyard, the old man was talking to Baichuran. When he saw Qin Shuru and the other two girls walk out of the room, a complicated look flashed across the old man's eyes before he calmly spoke. "I already know what happened here. You all can go back first. Don't worry, I will definitely give you an explanation." He didn't mention anything about punishing Baichuran. Hearing this, Qin Shuru and the other two girls didn't say anything and left Baichuran's cave dwelling accompanied by Chen Ling and the others. As the Sacred Palace group left, the old man's face instantly darkened. He first looked at Baichuran, then turned to the four candidates. Under the old man's gaze, Baichuran's expression didn't change much, but the four candidates instantly paled. This matter was concealed, and the news was also sealed. One night passed. This night, Chun Ling and the others stayed in Flower Fairy's cave, and Flower Fairy and the other two did not sleep at all. On the morning of the second day, the old servant of Yin Yangzi personally came to Flower Fairy's residence. After seeing Flower Fairy and the other two girls, the old man first comforted them and reprimanded them. Then, he went straight to the point and said with a serious expression, "Ancestor, you already know what happened yesterday. Baichuran's actions are indeed worse than an animal's. However, after a night of interrogation and investigation, we found that it was not Bai Churan's intention. She was deceived by someone. The 4 candidates deceived Bai Churan and made her do such a thing. Now, the 4 of them have been locked up in Sunless Mountain. This is their punishment. Here are some compensation from the sect. Accept it. Sunless Mountain was a place specially built by the Yin and Yang sect to punish their disciples. There was no sunlight all year round and the Yin Qi was oppressive. The Yin Qi was like maggots that would constantly devour a person's flesh and spiritual energy. Although it wouldn't kill a person, it was definitely unbearable. The 4 candidates had been locked up in Sunless Mountain and were not allowed to leave for a year. This was their punishment. However, the true culprit, Bai Churan, was completely fine. The old man did not mention her punishment at all. Gu Lingyao was the first to lose her temper. She asked the old man in dissatisfaction, "That can't be right. Bai Churan is the mastermind. Why isn't she punished?" "I've already said that Bai Churan was deceived. She has been locked up by the ancestor, and is reflecting on her mistakes in her cave dwelling." Reflecting on her mistakes in her own cave dwelling? Gu Lingyao was furious. "Are you lying to a 3-year-old? What kind of punishment is this? It's better to let Bai Churan recuperate in her own cave dwelling." Just as Gu Lingyao was about to refute, Qin Shuru grabbed Gu Lingyao and shook his head at her, indicating that she didn't need to say anything more. Then he looked at the old man and said, "Thank you. Thank you very much, Patriarch Yin Yangzi. However, I don't think this matter is over yet. Our husbands should be arriving soon. Please add vote recommend." Chapter 1256. How could Qin Shuru not understand Yin Yangzi's decision to punish him? To put it bluntly, Yin Yangzi had no intention of severely punishing Bai Churan. As Bai Churan had said last night, he was one of the 2 chosen of the Taiyang sect. As such, how could Yin Yangzi really punish him severely? Even if Bai Churan's hand had really been injured last night, Yin Yangzi would only minimize the problem. In fact, if he had to make a choice, Yin Yangzi might even abandon the Sacred Palace group and save Bai Churan. This was what it meant by strength determined everything. Bai Churan was a chosen on the saint rankings and was more important than the Sacred Palace group. As such, Yin Yangzi could only choose the lesser of 2 evils. As for the 4 prospective holy sons who were locked up in Sunless Mountain, it was just a symbolic punishment. At the same time, it could be said that they were scapegoats. She was no longer the ignorant girl from before. Therefore, Qin Shuru and the other 2 girls naturally understood the meaning behind this, including Gu Lingyao. However, the little girl had a straightforward personality and would speak her mind, unlike Baihua Fairy and Qin Shuru, who were able to keep things to themselves. As for the meaning behind Qin Shuru's words, it was actually very simple. Now that Xiao Chen had returned safely, Yin Yangzi should also be aware of this matter. As such, once Xiao Chen knew about this matter, given Xiao Chen's temper, he would obviously not let it end peacefully. Since the Taiyang sect had chosen to protect Bai Churan, the Sacred Palace could only seek justice in their own way. Moreover, this was also a reminder to Yin Yangzi that when the time came, Xiao Chen and Bai Churan would definitely only be able to choose one out of the 2. It would be impossible to choose both. Similarly, understanding Qin Shuru's meaning, the old man did not say anything. He nodded slightly and left. After the old man left, Qin Shuru and the other 2 girls also looked at the so-called compensation given by Yin Yangzi. One had to admit that Yin Yangzi was indeed generous. The pills and talismans were all extremely precious. It could be said that Yin Yangzi had given enough compensation this time. However, the 3 girls were not too interested in the compensation. After a casual glance, they put it away. Qin Shuru called Qin Yao over. "Madam," Qin Yao quickly walked into the hall and bowed to the 3 girls. Qin Shuru immediately said. Qin Yao, make a trip to the sacred palace immediately and inform my husband of what happened here. Tell him to hurry to the Taiyang sect as soon as possible. He didn't intend to conceal this matter. After all, the matter wasn't over yet. Bai Churan hadn't received any punishment after this incident, and this had undoubtedly aided his arrogance. In this way, how could Bai Churan, who'd tasted the sweetness of victory, give up just like that? Therefore, the three girls wanted Xiao Chun to hurry to the Taiyang sect as soon as possible before things got worse. Women had to learn to rely on men. It was not to say that women who relied on men were vases. This was different. For example, the three girls clearly did not have the means or ability to deal with Bai Churan. If they still chose to hide the truth from Xiao Chen, they would truly be fools. If Bai Churan really succeeded, it would be too late for regret. Qin Yao nodded when she heard Qin Shuru's words. She then turned and hurried to the sacred palace. The Taiyang sect and the sacred palace had already constructed a teleportation formation, so it was not troublesome to travel between the two. She could reach the sacred palace on the same day from the Taiyang sect. While Qin Yao was hurrying to the sacred palace, the old servant respectfully stood in front of Yangzi in his cave dwelling. He told Yangzi the details of his discussion with Qin Shuru and the other two girls. Yangzi smiled faintly. That little girl wants to tell me that I can only choose between Xiao Chen and Bai Churan. Indeed. Regardless of what will happen to Xiao Chen, Bai Churan will definitely not let Xiao Chen go. Even if we want to protect him, we can't guarantee that nothing will go wrong unless Xiao Chen never leaves the Taiyang sect. The old servant nodded in agreement. Whether it was Bai Churan or Xiao Chen, the two of them were like fire and water. There was no way to reconcile them. Yangzi did not seem to care too much about the situation. He smiled and said, "Fine, let them fight among themselves. After all, this is a world where the strong survive. However, I'm curious about Xiao Chen. Make the arrangements. If Xiao Chen arrives at the Taiyang sect, immediately prepare for his talent test." Yes, but should we send someone to protect Xiao Chen? After all, he's no match for Bai Churan right now. The old servant nodded, but then he asked if they should send someone to protect Xiao Chen. Not for now. I want to see what Xiao Chen's talent is like. Since Xiao Xing and the others admire Xiao Chen so much, I'd like to see if Xiao Chen really is as heaven-defying as they say. If he's just ordinary trash, then let Bai Churan do as she pleases, Yangzi said indifferently. Yangzi did not plan to protect Xiao Chen for now because he was not sure if Xiao Chen had what it took to make him give up on Bai Churan. If he did not, then he could only give Xiao Chen to Bai Churan to vent his anger. Yangzi's approach was very realistic, but also understandable. After all, the central world was a place where the strong preyed on the weak. After giving a few instructions, the old servant took his leave, and Yangzi closed his eyes to cultivate again. At the same time, the sacred palace. Qin Yao didn't waste any time and quickly arrived at the sacred palace through the teleportation array. As soon as she arrived, she headed straight for the dustless sacred hall. In Xiao Chen's cave dwelling, Qin Yao saw Xiao Chen. At this moment, Xiao Chen was sparring with Princess Fengjue in the courtyard. Of course, it was more accurate to say that Princess Fengjue was giving Xiao Chen pointers. Long Yang was lazily drinking wine at the side, while Tianyu was quietly watching from the side. Xiao Chen and Princess Fengjue were exchanging blows in a special training field. But at this moment, Qin Yao rushed in hurriedly. Sensing Qin Yao's arrival, Xiao Chen and Princess Fengjue stopped fighting at the same time. Xiao Chen turned to Qin Yao with a smile. "Qin Yao, why are you here? Weren't you with Shui Rou and the others at the Heavenly Yin Extreme Yang sect?" "Young master, something happened." Qin Yao didn't say much. She directly told Xiao Chen what had happened at the Heavenly Yin Extreme Yang sect. After hearing Qin Yao's story, the smile on Xiao Chen's face disappeared. His eyes were filled with icy killing intent as he said coldly, "By Chiron, you're courting death." He never thought that Qin Shuru and the others would encounter such a thing at the heavenly Een extreme Yang sect. The 100-flower fairy, green bamboo, and Siju were almost killed by Chiron. Xiao Chen's heart burned with anger. He turned to Tian Yu and said, "Pack up. We're leaving for the heavenly Een extreme Yang sect today." Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1257. The killing intent in his eyes had reached its peak. Tian Yu nodded without saying anything after hearing Xiao Chen's question. Tian Yu was also infuriated when she heard about what had happened to Qin Shuru and the other two girls in the heavenly Een Tai Yang sect. Having decided to rush to the heavenly Een Tai Yang sect overnight, Xiao Chen turned to look at Feng Ju and Long Yang and said indifferently, "Brother Long Yang, Princess Feng Ju, you've heard it too. I have to rush to the heavenly Een Tai Yang sect today. Please forgive me for not receiving you well. As for Brother Long Yang, you can wait in the sacred palace for a few days. I'll have my second sister come to the sacred palace to meet you." What had happened in the heavenly Een Tai Yang sect had caught Xiao Chen by surprise. At the same time, he was burning with rage. Naturally, he couldn't care about Long Yang and Feng Ju. Feng Ju shouted when she heard Xiao Chen's words. "By Chiron? That ant is really a beast." As a woman, Feng Ju was clearly infuriated by Chiron's actions. On the other hand, Long Yang continued to drink as he spoke indifferently. "It's fine. Feng Ju and I will accompany you. We have nothing to do anyway." Feng Ju naturally wouldn't refuse Long Yang's suggestion to go to the heavenly Een Tai Yang sect together. Seeing this, Xiao Chen didn't say anything. After all, with their identities, there was no danger in going to the heavenly Een Tai Yang sect. At most, they would be expelled. Not in the mood to be entangled in these matters, Xiao Chen headed to Xiao Qing and Bai Rui's residence and told them that he had to rush to the heavenly Een Tai Yang sect overnight. As for what had happened to Qin Shuru and the other two girls, Xiao Chen didn't say anything. After all, the two elders couldn't help much and would only worry them if he told them. Bai Rui was naturally reluctant to see Xiao Chen leave so suddenly, but Xiao Chen could only patiently persuade her. "Mother, don't worry. The heavenly Een Tai Yang sect is connected to the sacred palace through a teleportation array. I will come back often. Also, if you need anything, you can send me a message." The teleportation array was indeed a lot more convenient. Bai Rui nodded reluctantly, but it was obvious that she still couldn't bear to part with Xiao Chen. On the other hand, Xiao Qing, who was at the side, spoke up at this time. "All right, Chen has already grown up and is a married man. We don't have to be too worried. Our children and grandchildren will have their own fortune. Moreover, it's not a good idea to keep Chen at home. A man has ambitions to travel far, so let him go." Xiao Chen's father. Calm. How? Calm. After bidding farewell to his parents, Xiao Chen soon left the holy palace, ignoring Bai Rui's reluctance. He went to the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Een through the teleportation formation. He didn't tell anyone about his trip. Only Tianyu, Qing Yao, Long Yang, and Feng Ju accompanied him. Although the sacred palace Saint Venerate in charge of guarding the teleportation array was puzzled by Xiao Chen's sudden trip to the heavenly Een Taiyang sect, he naturally didn't stop him. They easily arrived at the heavenly Een Taiyang sect through the teleportation array. Inside the sect, Xiao Chen's group didn't encounter any obstructions because of Enyangzi's instructions. They smoothly arrived at 100-Flower Fairy's cave dwelling. Xiao Chen saw Chun Ling, Long Qing, Chen Yu, and the others in the cave dwelling. Of course, 100-Flower Fairy and the other two girls were also there. When Xiao Chen's figure appeared outside the cave dwelling, Qin Shuru and the other two girls, who were already waiting at the entrance, immediately ran towards Xiao Chun and rushed into Xiao Chen's arms. This was especially true for Gu Lingyao, who was clinging on to Xiao Chun and sobbing, "Why did you come back so late? We were all bullied by them." She was like a child who had been wronged outside and had come home to complain. Faced with Gu Lingyao's tearful complaints, Xiao Chun gently patted her on the back and said, all right, your husband is back now." Xiao Chun then looked towards 100 Flower Fairy. She lowered her head under Xiao Chen's gaze, not daring to meet Xiao Chen's eyes. In Flower Fairy's heart, she had always been brooding. After all, Bai Churan had seen her body. Although Bai Churan did not have the time to do anything about it, it had always been a knot in Flower Fairy's heart. Seeing through 100 Flower Fairy's thoughts, Xiao Chun revealed a gentle smile and said, "Don't let your imagination run wild. One day, I will kill him with my own hands." Although he didn't say it explicitly, his words revealed Xiao Chen's intentions. Hearing this, 100 Flower Fairy was stunned at first, but soon nodded with reddened eyes. Hugging Gu Lingyao with Qin Shuru, 100 Flower Fairy, and Tian Yu by his side, the group walked into the cave dwelling. Following behind Xiao Chun, Long Yang and Feng Ju were obviously ignored by everyone. This wasn't intentional, but it was because everyone's attention was focused on Xiao Chun. Of course, Long Yang didn't care about this. Following Xiao Chun, Long Yang said with admiration and envy, "Brother Xiao Chun is really a role model for my generation. I thought that Tian Yu was already a fairy that descended to the mortal world. To be able to have such a beauty in my life is already worth living. Who would have thought that he would have 3 beautiful wives? TSK, Brother Xiao Chun really doesn't show off his true colors." "What? You're so jealous. Do you want me to castrate you now? That way you won't have to worry about finding other women." However, hearing this, Feng Ju said coldly. Long Yang, who was still indulging in his fantasies, suddenly heard Feng Ju's words. He felt a sudden tremble and unconsciously clamped his legs together as he laughed embarrassedly. No, I'm just joking. Hee, it's just a joke. You can't take it seriously." As the two of them spoke, they pulled away from Xiao Chun and the others. When Long Yang and Feng Ju arrived at the hall, Xiao Chun and the others had already taken their seat. At this moment, Long Qing said angrily, "Little brother, that Bai Churan is too despicable. I must kill him." Long Qing's voice was very loud. His words could be heard from outside the hall. As soon as his voice fell, before Xiao Chun could reply, everyone saw Long Yang swagger in with Feng Ju beside him. As for Long Yang, he said to Xiao Chun with a playful smile, "I say, brother Xiao Chun, why don't I help you kill Bai Churan?" As soon as he opened his mouth, Long Yang directly said that he wanted to kill Bai Churan. Xiao Chun didn't doubt this. Although he didn't know the exact ranking of Long Yang and Feng Ju on the saint ranking, based on Xiao Chen's understanding of Long Yang, this guy was definitely not a person who would make irresponsible remarks. Since Long Yang said that he could kill Bai Churan, he definitely could do it. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1258. Long Yang said he wanted to kill Bai Churan as soon as he opened his mouth, as if Bai Churan was an ant that he could easily crush. No one knew Long Yang's identity, so they all looked at him when they heard his words. When they saw his mischievous smile, everyone's gaze fell on Xiao Chun. Clearly, they were asking about Long Yang and Feng Ju's identities. Under everyone's gazes, Xiao Chun stood up and strode over to Long Yang. He smiled and introduced them to everyone present. "These two are my friends. It's all thanks to them that I was able to return safely. Long Yang, Feng Ju, they're both chosen on the saint rankings." Holy sons and holy daughters on the saint rankings? In the beginning, no one paid too much attention when they heard Xiao Chun say that Long Yang and Feng Ju were their saviors, but when they heard that they were both chosen on the saint rankings, their eyes clearly changed. Chosen on the Saint rankings. Everyone was no stranger to these 4 words. Wasn't Bai Churan a chosen on the Saint rankings? He alone was enough to suppress everyone from the sacred palace. Moreover, Bai Churan's ranking on the Saint rankings wasn't high. He was only ranked 93rd, the last on the Saint rankings. Even so, Bai Churan still had the ability to suppress everyone. This wasn't because Bai Churan had absorbed the power of the Taiyang sect, but because his own strength alone was enough to give everyone a headache. To be honest, even if Chen Ling, Long Qing, and Chen Yu joined forces, they would only be able to contend against Bai Churan for a while. It was almost impossible for them to win. Of course, this didn't mean that their talent was inferior to Bai Churan's, but because of the cultivation environment they grew up in. One had to admit that the cultivation environment of the Central World was far superior to that of the North Star realm. Thus, with such a difference, even if 2 people had the same natural talent, there would definitely be a difference in their final achievements. This was the so-called illusory realm changing a person. However, as long as Chen Ling and the others were given enough time, they would definitely be able to catch up to Bai Churan. Facing the gazes of the crowd, Long Yang did not back down. The smile on his face did not change at all. On the other hand, Feng Ju's face was indifferent. It was as if he did not want to talk to the crowd. Of course, this was Feng Ju's character. He did not have any intention of looking down on them. After the introductions, Long Yang and Feng Ju took their seat. Xiao Qin smiled at Long Yang and said, "Brother Long Yang, I will personally behead Bai Churan." Although Xiao Qin believed that Long Yang was strong enough to kill Bai Churan, he didn't plan on asking him for help. Firstly, Bai Churan had to be killed by him personally. Secondly, even though Long Yang had a noble status, if he really killed Bai Churan, the Taiyang sect wouldn't let the matter rest. Even if he couldn't kill Long Yang, he could imprison him. Long Yang didn't say anything else when he heard Xiao Qin. Xiao Qin turned to look at the crowd. "Big brother, second sister, senior brothers and junior sisters, don't act rashly for now. I will deal with it. Everyone should cultivate during this period of time. There's no need to take the initiative to offend Bai Churan." Xiao Qin actually had a rough plan to deal with Bai Churan. If he wanted to kill Bai Churan, Xiao Qin had to be at the perfection of the Tao Emperor realm, at the very least. Moreover, he had to display sufficient talent to make the Taiyang sect feel that he had more potential than Bai Churan. Only then would the Taiyang sect give up on protecting and favoring Bai Churan. Otherwise, not to mention whether Xiao Qin could kill Bai Churan with the Taiyang sect's protection, how would he face the Taiyang sect even if he could kill Bai Churan? At that time, even the sacred palace would be implicated. This matter couldn't be rushed. Everyone nodded in agreement when they heard Xiao Qin's words. After that, they stopped worrying about Bai Churan and started chatting instead. Of course, most of them were asking about Xiao Qin during this period of time. They were naturally worried that Xiao Qin had been able to safely return to the human territory after being missing for a few months. In response to their questions, Xiao Qin gave them a simple explanation of what had happened. They chatted until late at night. After drinking together, they dispersed. Long Yang and Feng Ju naturally stayed in 100 Flower Fairy's dwelling. After all, they didn't have a place to stay. Of course, Long Qing was also asked to stay by Xiao Qin. He didn't forget his promise to Long Yang and introduced Long Qing to Long Yang. After that, Xiao Qin no longer cared about the two's discussion and turned to accompany Qin Shiru and the other 3 girls. Sitting in the courtyard, Long Yang looked at Long Qing in front of him with a hint of doubt in his eyes. Judging from her aura, Long Qing was definitely a pure-blooded dragon, and her bloodline power wasn't inferior to his at all. A pure-blooded dragon with such a bloodline power could only be from the Dragon Emperor's bloodline like him. However, Long Yang didn't remember Long Qing from the Dragon Emperor's bloodline. Were you really born in the North Star realm? It was impossible for a pure-blooded dragon to be born in the North Star realm, so Long Yang tried to test the waters. Hearing this, Long Qing said expressionlessly, "That's right. I'm in a bad mood right now, so I don't want to discuss this with you. If you have time, we can talk about it another day." After admitting that she was indeed born in the North Star realm, Long Qing said indifferently. She didn't give Long Yang any face at all. After saying that, she got up and left. Looking at Long Qing's back, Long Yang didn't stop her. He sank into deep thought and muttered softly, "This can't be. A descendant of the Dragon Emperor's bloodline can't be born in the North Star realm. That's impossible. Also, if that's the case, this Long Qing is my younger sister, or elder sister." He was a little confused, but Long Qing didn't want to talk at all, so there was nothing Long Yang could do. The next morning, Xiao Chen woke up early as usual. Originally, Xiao Chen didn't want to make trouble for Bai Churan so soon, because Xiao Chen knew that even if he went to find him now, he wouldn't get anything out of it. If he wanted to find him, he would have to kill him in one blow. As for Bai Churan, Xiao Chen wouldn't give him a chance to turn things around. However, Xiao Chen didn't take the initiative to find Bai Churan, but Bai Churan took the initiative to come. After learning that Xiao Chen had returned to the human territory last night and had come to the Taiyang sect, Bai Churan took the initiative to visit early in the morning. She was very arrogant and directly injured Si Ju. Si Ju tried to stop Bai Churan, but Bai Churan didn't say anything and directly injured Si Ju. Of course, the injury wasn't serious, and Bai Churan didn't kill her. However, this movement quickly attracted the attention of Xiao Chen and the others. Walking quickly to the front yard, Xiao Chen saw the arrogant Bai Churan at a glance. "Please add me to your collection, monthly vote, recommend me." You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.